Okay, it is 6 o'clock. I'm going to call this meeting of the Champaign County Board to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Straub. Taylor.
Here.
Thorsland. Vantage Theronot. Wilson.
Here.
Cowart. Esri.
Here.
Farney.
Here.
Furtado. Here. Greer. Hanauer Friedman.
Here.
Locke.
Here.
Lockshin.
Here.
Michaels. Owen.
Here.
Pugh.
Present.
Rodriguez. Rogers.
Present.
Sexton. Smith.
Here.
Storr.
Present.
Carter.
We have a quorum. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? Aaron and then Ellie. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. I have no slips for public participation, so we will go on past public participation to budget presentations. First up, Steve, you are up as coroner.
All right, before we get started, I've got a couple quick notes. Chris, Tammy wanted me to update you on the cost per child for Head Start. So for Head Start, there's 250 slots and it's $15,647. For Early Head Start, there's 141 slots and it's $17,259. And Early Head Start Expansion, there's 90 slots, and that's $23,977.
Is this a year-round program, or is it 9 months, or how?
I do not believe they're year-round because they have a summer wave of employment and whatnot, so I don't believe they're year-round.
All right, and then tonight we'll focus on the general fund. There will be non-general fund items as well, though. For example, the coroner has both general and non-general funds, so instead of making them come for 2 nights, he's going to do them both together. The only one that wanted to come all 3 nights was the sheriff, and I had to tell him no. For the most part, when we go through the slides, general fund slides are green and non-general fund slides are black. And let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, I've never done this before, so bear with me. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you. It might be easier that way. So the slide you have in front of you shows the 24 and 25 budgets. Highlights being that professional services will need to be increased approximately $230,000 due to traveling to Springfield. I think we talked about that last time I was here. If we can find a pathologist, obviously we can bring that number back down, but I think we should plan for the future of having to have to go to Springfield. I talked with our laboratory. Their fees are frozen for 2025, so I don't see any problems there, and that should be remain steady. Our waste disposal fees, since we're not performing autopsies, should go down significantly. And then we are requesting 2 additional deputy coroner positions with a total approximate cost of $150,000. And I understand that's tied to the public safety sales tax increase. So any questions about the general fund?
Stephanie.
Could you tell us a little bit about what you could do if you had 2 more deputy coroners?
Sure. So the reason for the extra deputies is right now we have 5 deputies covering 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. That causes them to do a variation of schedules, causing standby shifts. And if we could bring on 2 more people, then we could get to a more steady schedule where they could just work 40 hours a week.
Go ahead, JJ.
I know we don't have any part-time deputies right now, but would that help you at all with
with scheduling, things like that, if you were able to do that again?
It would help some, yes. I mean, any additional staffing is going to help, but I think to get to a point where we need to be, I think we really need to get the 2 full-time folks.
Go ahead. Sorry, Jeff.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for being here. So what work is not getting done if there is not 2 additional deputy coroners?
Well, the work is getting done. It's just taking a little bit longer to get it done. And the deputies are going to have to work longer hours and some shifts that work out, but they're not ideal for work life.
Then for longer hours, they're paid overtime, or is it salary? I don't know.
Well, so currently they work shifts that are generally 12 hours in length. There are some 10-hour shifts. And then there's what we call standby shifts, where they're getting paid $2 an hour to be the second person available if we get 2 calls at the same time.
So one more follow-up question, then what is the offset for extra hours versus additional individuals? Is there a balance somewhere? How much more are you paying for the additional work for the additional hours? Do you have an idea about that?
I don't off the top of my head. I can tell you that every day there's a 12-hour shift that is $2 an hour paid to the deputy unless they get called out. And then they go to their normal fee, which would actually be overtime automatically. So I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to answer that question, but I will get you those numbers.
Yeah.
You certainly can.
It'd be good to,
So the overtime budget is a line item in the budget. So let's see, for '24, we're expecting to spend $40,000 in overtime, which is probably the salary of a full-time deputy
of
coroner.
one full-time deputy.
Yeah.
And that essentially really just covers the overtime for holidays.
The other, I think, aside from reducing overtime, which we might not be able to reduce as much because it's 24/7, 365, is retention. It's a very demanding schedule, and there is a lot of training that the coroner has to invest in the deputy coroners, and then for them to burn out and leave within a month, a year, 18 months, it's a real drain on the resources and the functions in the coroner's office that we can't maintain these people. But if we could shorten the lengths that they're on call and give them more people to choose from to make adjustments to their schedule, we could significantly reduce that burnout.
I understand that. My next question then is, when the monthly HR report doesn't show deputy coroners leaving, we have seems like a big gap in correction officers, but not in deputy coroners. So when you say retention, are you thinking some are going to leave soon, or what's the history so far?
Well, the report's only going to show you a position that's been vacant for essentially more than a month because of the time cycle of the report. So the deputy coroner position, it seems like they fill quickly and you invest in the training, but in general, the longevity of the person in the position does not seem to be matching a lot of our other positions, would be my kind of off-the-cuff analysis.
I think that's very true. All the deputy coroners we currently have, I believe, are under 3 years of service.
Under 3 years, okay.
Stephanie.
For a long time in the coroner's office, we would budget for the contractual pathologist, and then around this time, the coroner would come and be like, we don't have enough money, and then we would have to put more money in, right? So a question I have is, it looks to me like maybe we're under budgeting for overtime. If for 2 years in a row, the overtime was, about 40K and we're budgeting 23K, is that a similar situation? Or is there enough gap in, cover it, you know what I mean? Like when people leave, that the budget can, because I don't believe the coroner's office came to us with a budget amendment for staff last year. So I guess, is this, my question is should we bump that up? Or do you think based on turnover and timing that this is enough because I don't want us to be, we should budget what our actual expenses are if we can.
Sure, I agree. So the current budget, the overtime money that's there only covers holiday pay, because they're getting triple time. So, that money is gone with holidays. It doesn't cover any additional overtime that may be needed, and we have a fair amount of that, depending upon staffing. So I can't give you an exact number on that, but yeah, I mean, it's clearly, if there's not enough there to cover any additional overtime outside the holidays.
But yes, we do essentially gamble that if there's a need for more overtime, it's because there's a vacancy. So what we would be asking of you would be maybe to transfer money out of the full-time and put it into the overtime because we need to pay, but there doesn't need to be more money because the vacancy covers the overtime cost, and we have overtime because we have vacancy.
Chris?
What would you say that the deputy coroner would work in a week? Like 48 hours, 40,
So
60?
right now, the schedule tries to work them anywhere between 36 and 40 hours a week. And then that also includes that 12-hour standby time where they're getting paid $2 an hour.
Go ahead, Leah.
Thanks. I know that you touched kind of briefly on the whole, if we had 2 more deputies, things would get done quicker. And I know that one of the big concerns is for the general public is being able to get their death certificates in a timely manner. Can you kind of ballpark, like, I mean, you can tell us how long it's taking now on average, but like, if you had the 2 more deputies, what sort of a decrease in time do you think you'd see for that?
I think you could probably see anywhere from 10 to 15 days quicker. So right now, a coroner certificate that doesn't require an autopsy takes about 30 to 35 days. When there's an autopsy and a further investigation, it can take 40 to 60 days.
Anyone else? All right. Let's see, then you've got your other fund, so.
So this is the fund that the coroner's office uses to purchase capital equipment. It's basically funded by the cremation permit fund. So every time somebody gets a cremation permit, they pay $100 for that, and that comes to the coroner's office. So we kind of manage our own capital fund from that. That allowed us this year to purchase one of the new vehicles that we talked about last time I was here. We also replaced a mortuary cot, and we need to replace one more this year. So that fund covers a lot of those things that are not covered under the general fund. So a lot of the day-to-day supplies are covered under that fund.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Steve. I was just looking at the 2 I could talk louder, but okay. I was just looking at the request for the 2 positions, and there's just a typo on there about, on the justification for the position. I think the deputies would cover, it says 1456. I think you meant to say 14,560. It'd be 2080 hours in a year times 7 deputies, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I
Yes,
just call
thank you.
that up. You're
I
welcome.
appreciate that. Thank
You're
you.
welcome.
Stephanie?
Do we have a sense of counties in Illinois, like comparable counties, staff size compared to our county? And if not, is that maybe something we can work on doing? I mean, I know that every county is probably different in terms of, you know, cases you get called on and things like that, but do we have any sort of data on that like, oh yeah, like we're way under, or way, you know what I'm saying? That might be if we don't now, that might be something useful to investigate.
Sure.
We don't have it now, but we can get it. We're doing it for a couple other places. I would just say that everyone should keep in mind When we're looking at that, I think there's a big difference in offices, whether or not they do autopsies on site or they transfer autopsies out. And right now, we're fluctuating between both of those options, but we can definitely pull some comparable sized counties and also preferably ones that also have P-TEL and see what their staffing sizes are.
And it also makes a difference if you have a trauma center like we do with Carl.
Stephanie?
I'm sorry, I didn't anticipate this many questions for you, but one of the other ways that we've had to, one of the driving forces for us having to put more money into the coroner's budget, like partway through the year, was because of the number of opioid deaths, and that we didn't have enough money to do that specific kind of investigation, in part because the product changed, and so like the tests would have to change, and then it'd be more expensive, like keeping up with that. Do you feel like that piece of your budget is adequately funded? Because my first 5 years on the board, it was not. So, and it just, every year, we just did not have enough money specifically for that. And so, do you feel like that piece of your budget have we finally brought it to where it needs to be?
Yes, opioid deaths are down in the county, so I think that's a very positive thing we talked about last time I was here. And then NMS has kept their toxicology testing at flat for 2025. So we're in good shape, I think.
Not seeing anyone else? Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience with me, as this was my first time doing this, so.
Did a great job. Next up is Sheriff's Office. Greetings, Dustin.
Good evening. Yeah. I've been practicing for weeks. Good evening, everyone. So I have done this a couple of times, so I'll just try to hit some of the highlights, and then if you have questions, then you can surely ask them. But the first, and I'll try to stay on cycle with the right slides. So the first budget that you will see from mine is the 040 fund, which covers the law enforcement and records sections of the Champaign County Sheriff's Office. In 2025, fiscal year 25, we are estimating a revenue of $1.5 million, a little over that, and an expenditure total of about $7.3 million. Some highlights include our body camera and in-car camera contract is up at the end of this year, and we have been speaking with Axon Enterprises about updating that contract. They currently have our contract. We have a lot of things that are tied into the evidentiary part, and it makes sense to go with them. I am expecting, even though that cost is substantially higher than it has been in the last contract, I am also expecting that a large amount of that will be reimbursed by the Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board. So if you recall, the last couple of years, I've came back to the county board for budget amendments when we've gotten those funds reimbursement from Oletsby. This year, for fiscal year 25, we're actually working that into revenue, knowing that we've got to update our body cameras, knowing we've got to update our technology. So instead of having to come back every year with that, we're working it into revenue, and then we're working the expense in as well. So you will not see me in the future coming back for those budget amendments every single year. Contractual increases in the budget, but otherwise we remain steady and a level from fiscal year 24. Probably most importantly, and this has kind of evolved over the last month and a half, additional supervisory positions for my law enforcement division. This is very important. This is something that my leadership team and I have been working on for the last year or so, but there has been no urgency about it until recent events in Central Illinois within the last couple of months. In some situations, more than I would like, there is not always a trained supervisor on every law enforcement shift. We utilize what we call as upgrades whenever a sergeant needs off. We do not invest the amount of training that we do in these individuals because of the fact that they may differ from shift to shift. So I have started the process. It's important enough that I have started the process already of working with the union to increase my sergeant number from 8 to 10, using current funding that I'm expected to have left over from personnel this year. And then I will do what it takes to get that additional funding, about $117,000, including fringe benefits and salary, to keep those positions going into fiscal year 25 and beyond. Now, I would really appreciate it if the county board would consider giving me that $117,000 so we can sustain this and I don't have to make cuts other places. But I think that events have told us that in 2024, 2025, having a law enforcement division as big as the Champaign County Sheriff's Office and not having a trained supervisor on at all times is just completely setting the county up for liability. And that's not a position that I want to be in, and I'm pretty sure it's a position that you don't want to be in either. In your packet, so this is not already integrated into the budget. This is something for you to consider adding to the budget for fiscal year 25. You will also see the proposal that I would love for you to approve, and that is adding the 2 sergeant positions, but also providing funding to backfill those with 2 deputy positions. So how it is right now, my plan of action is I am simply promoting 2 deputies to the position of sergeant, and those 2 positions are not being backfilled with deputies. So that takes my numbers down by a couple. But it is so important to us here in the county to have those supervisory positions 24/7 that I've taken action immediately on those. So out of all my requests, I would strongly consider that you give that one some weight. I have also had multiple other funding requests submitted for consideration, including training and personnel. So we do a really good job of meeting our mandates. There is legislation coming down the pike that I've mentioned before, such as mental health response through the CESA Act. We will be required by law, we are required by law, it's not been in effect yet. We will be required by law to have some kind of mental health response team that is not reliant on law enforcement in Champaign County. We've been working on it for the last couple of years. It keeps being postponed from year to year, but we continue to work on it. I'm on the task force for our region to develop something. And so that expense is coming down the pike. And we will have to see what happens with the legislation to see what kind of resources the sheriff's office will have to provide in that. The intent at the beginning was that we're taking law enforcement out of it. The consensus now is we can't take law enforcement out of it, but we can be heavier on mental health professionals and then have those responders as law enforcement as kind of a backseat. So that is something that's coming down. Also, I did some, year after year, I have requested additional deputy sheriffs. I think it's very important that we have additional deputy sheriffs in the county. I was figuring up our time, or our call response time in fiscal year 23. On average, it takes my deputies 12 and a half minutes to respond to a high priority call. And that's kind of subjective, but examples of high priority calls may be an injury accident or a fatality accident, a domestic battery or a domestic altercation in process, a shooting incident where it just occurred. 12 and a half minutes. And that's not necessarily meaning that a deputy gets there in that amount of time. That means that an officer gets there in that amount of time. So if it's close to Mahomet, in Mahomet Township, that could mean a Mahomet officer getting there in 12 and a half minutes before my deputy even gets there. In the northern part of the county and the southern part of the county, that time is a little bit higher with 13 and a half minutes and 15 and a half minutes, further away from Champaign-Urbana where the majority of our call volume is. And so as we are considering where positions we need, where we need to invest, I would strongly consider to take into account those deputy times and how long you would like to wait on a deputy if you have a crisis that you need somebody there for. I believe that's all for my 080 or 040 budget. You want me to take questions now, or?
Yep. Go ahead, Ellie.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the mental health piece that you just mentioned and where specifically funding would be coming from for that and how many staff are involved?
So we are not that far yet because how the state of Illinois has tasked us, it's by EMS districts. So that means that we are trying to come up with something that works not only just for Champaign-Urbana, but also for Champaign County, which is a lot different response for mental health than the cities. But we're also trying to have the same model for Clay County, for an example, down in Flora. And they are substantially different than even Champaign County is. So that's why it's taken so long to try to come up with this. It's probably going to take at least one deputy or detective, whatever we want to call it, on a full-time basis to be that responder. And that's not even starting to talk about what other kind of resources we're going to need for that response, where that money is going to come from. I don't expect that it'll come from law enforcement, but I don't know because we haven't gotten that far. What we are tasked with through the CESA Act is getting this team together. And it's been a long time, and we've got a long ways to go about the two. So I'm sorry I can't answer your question specifically. We just don't know yet.
Emily.
Thanks. And it sure seems like the county will probably be on the hook for that. I just want to underline that's coming from us. I did have a question. It recently came to my attention. I went on a about two shifts long ride along with Urbana. In it, I realized that the county and the sheriff responds to some areas of Urbana almost exclusively. So like that they're like kind of carved out of that jurisdiction. So I just wanted to, I don't know, do you offhand know what areas those are? So like as somebody who is watching this and lives in Urbana might be able to kind of pinpoint what areas affect them directly.
I do. So Urbana Township, the parts of Urbana that are not in the city limits, so that would be Scottswood area for an example. Or if you go up to the High Cross, Brownfield, Airport Road area in northeast Urbana, those are all county jurisdictions. Ivanhoe Trailer Park on Perkins Road is county jurisdiction. And so in Champaign, we have Dobbins Downs, which is off Anthony Drive right behind Rural King. That's county jurisdiction. Down by the golf course on around Kirby area, around that area, that's county jurisdiction. So you're right, you would not know driving from town to town. There are some residents in Dobbins Downs and Champaign that this house is Champaign City, this house is Champaign County. And we don't even know it until we see on our ticket which one it is. And so that's where we have a lot of the challenges that the cities have as well, but we don't have the resources that the cities necessarily have. So yeah, that's a very good point. Thank you.
Thanks for responding to the question so fully.
Sure.
Stephanie.
You might recall when we allocated that sleep money, we gave it to Rantoul and we gave it to Dobbins Downs and we gave it to Scottswood, and the reason for that is we worked with the sheriff's office and said, where are you seeing a lot of calls? Where do you think that more light would be a good thing? And we targeted areas that are our law enforcement jurisdiction, and especially in Champaign, hadn't been eligible for their sleep program because they didn't really have that jurisdiction. So what we did butted right up against, depending on which side of the street you were on, you were eligible for the Champaign money or not. So a couple of questions. So one, I want to just be transparent that when Dustin, I really do appreciate this about you, Dustin, he never just does something, he always talks to people. And so when he, a couple of weeks ago, came and asked me about this whole, he wanted to convert people to be sergeants, and you know what I mean, from his deputies, and for the reasons that he said, and he said, listen, I have the money to cover it this year. I don't know that I have the money to cover it in future years, but I really think it's something that we should do. Now, to be perfectly blunt, he didn't even have to ask me that. Once we give any elected official their personnel money, they could just do whatever they want with it. But I really did appreciate that, and I was like, yeah, based on what you said, I think this is something that's really important for you to do. But that means we as a board then have to decide, are we going to fund out that additional $117,000, or are we going to ask Dustin, or the sheriff, to figure out how to make up that difference? And I think that's one of the decision points that we need to have in this budget cycle, right? Now, you do have enough turnover that you might be able to make up for it.
I'm working on that.
But I also don't know that that's a good methodology to budget, right? We don't do that. We, as a general rule, do not budget. I mean, that's not totally true. We do budget like 90% of empty positions, right? So like, we don't, I want it to be clear, we never budget like 100, if, we do not currently, our budgeting model right now is not like if we had 100% every single person, I know that bug is freaking me out too. We do not budget right now that like 100% cover, like as if we were 100% employed, right? But I also don't know that I think it's a good idea to that kind of gap to just say, we're not gonna budget it, right? And so I think that's one thing to keep in mind. My question for you, I just wanted to lay that out, that I think that right there is a decision point that this board is gonna have to make. The question I have for you is, you said in your beautiful, I don't want to say fantasy, but you would like to have the 2 deputies backfilled. How much would that cost? Because the 117 is just to convert 2 deputies to sergeant, and then that's it. Those deputies are gone, right? How much would it be full board to do both?
You have both requests in
Yeah.
your packet that were
Okay.
given to you.
Just
So
today, yeah.
the 17,000 is for the deputies to be promoted to sergeant, and that's it. Please keep in mind that they've already got the equipment and things that they need. For the 2 new positions, that would be sergeant positions, salary and benefits both. I didn't want to just do salary to my budget. I wanted to do both. $321,000 a year.
Okay.
For adding 2 additional sergeant positions. And then so that'd be a recurring cost.
Right.
And then we would also have an upfront cost of approximately $200,000 to get all the equipment and training and everything that we need, with a reoccurring cost of about $43,000 then for equipment and training.
So full board be 360 recurring?
That's about right, yeah.
So I just want us to keep in mind that if we don't pass the public safety sales tax, as we talked about last time, the fund balance on public safety sales tax that's real, that's not like, is about 2.1 million. So that means in less than 7 years, maybe around 6 years, that would wipe out that entire fund balance down to the bare minimum that we could have in it. And that would not include any of that money going to Susan's piece with the Jano situation, right? So I do want to say, like, on the board, when we're thinking about those, I guess are like 3 different options. We could say, hey, make up the whole difference in your budget. We could say, hey, we think we could find you the 117,000 recurring, or we could give him what he's asking for, which is the 360 a year. I just wanted to lay that out, like the landscape of the impact of those decisions. Personnel is always recurring. And that's something that, like, just because we have the money now, what does that mean for the future? That's something that we have to keep in mind. But that said, I do commend you. When you laid out this sergeant situation, I thought it was very proactive. I appreciated you coming to me, and I know you also went to JJ, so I appreciate that a great deal. Because, again, he didn't have to do that. He could have just did it. And sometimes we have people that do that, and I appreciate it a lot more, you being proactive. And the reason I didn't bring it up to the whole board is because I knew he was coming to budget, and this was just in like the last couple of weeks.
There have been a lot of, I don't want to say difficult conversations, but there have been a lot of conversations among my core leadership team over the last 2 months on where are we deficient, how can we not do things that have set examples in other areas. And this was important enough to us that we were willing to make that sacrifice in the future to keep these supervisory positions. So I would just ask if there is that money to get that in my budget.
Jamala.
So if we decide not to give you the 117, you said that you would do it anyway and you would make the cuts. Where would you make the cuts? Do you know?
I would have to not replace 2 deputy positions most likely.
Okay, so it would just be not replacing 2
Correct.
deputies. Okay.
Ellie.
Just really quickly to go back to Emily's point, because you left out my neighborhood as well in Champaign, which is also under the sheriff's jurisdiction, and many people don't realize that. I found out when my mother-in-law called 911 by accident shortly after we moved in, and that's, south of Windsor, just north of Savoy. So just adding that to the list of and 12-minute response time seems kind of slow.
Stephanie?
Ellie and I did not coordinate that, but piggybacking on what she said, I mean, one of the ways that the sheriff can make up this is anytime there's that kind of thing, he could just slow hire, right? If he has an empty position, you just wait a couple of months and you do that a couple of times and you get up, right? Like that's how a lot of times, I mean, that's how the county has balanced its personnel budget for years. The problem with that is for all that time where there's a person, that 12 and a half minutes might become 15. Right? And I think that that's something that's really important for us to understand, is that if we don't fully fund these offices, the time on the coroner's office, the time, right? If we don't fully fund Susan's office, if we don't fully fund the state's attorney's office, the time, today's, justice, right? The time for our residents to be safe and have the public safety and justice that they deserve just gets slowed down. And that's when we have a budget that's 80% personnel, which is what ours is, that's just the reality, right? But thank you. I appreciate your explanation of all of this.
Okay, moving on.
My next budget is 140. It's the Correctional Center. Court security also falls under this, and as do a couple of records positions as well. So revenue total estimated in fiscal year 25, $1.6 million, little over that. Expenditure total about $7.9 million. You will see that that is down substantially from the 10.5 that we budgeted in fiscal year 24. The reason for that is because of an anticipated reduction in inmate housing out of county. So I did not budget the $3 million as we have in the last couple of years for out-of-county housing. What I did was I budgeted the $25,000 that we did prior to closing the downtown jail. And as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago at the Committee of the Whole, we are always going to have a need to house at least a few inmates out of county, just by the classification issues that we have, protective custody, different things like that. And so we always have to budget for some of that. Now, the caveat is as with all construction projects, I don't want to be standing in front of you in February saying, this construction issue took longer than we expected and I need more money for out-of-county housing. I'm not expecting that to be an issue right now, but I'm trying to be transparent that if the consolidated facility does not open when we expect it to, please don't be surprised if I'm here asking you for more money. I do not expect that that's going to be the case at this point in time right now. Increase, so we did have some increase expected in food costs for inmates, for medical supplies, things that we don't have to spend money on whenever we have a reduced inmate population. We pay the other facilities to house our inmates, and then they take care of medical costs, food costs, things like that. Now when we have those inmates back, we're going to be responsible for paying for those services again. And so I tried to estimate what it would be based on current contract language. Luckily, most of everything here is contractual, or we can figure up what we've spent the last couple of years and then estimate with our the remaining inmate population what we may need. So that's where those figures come from. Otherwise, a flat budget from fiscal year 24, except for contractual increases that we have. Operational needs continue to be assessed. I have put in for, I have requested an extra correctional officer or two and an extra court security officer or two. Those were lower priority than what I put as the patrol sergeants, but the reason why is because we will statutorily be required to have an additional court security officer because we have that judge, that extra judge. We don't need that quite yet, but we could in fiscal year 25 need that extra court security officer. So this is me putting it on your radar so you're not surprised one day when I say, guess what, the statute says I have to be present in every single court proceeding. We have expanded what my 13 can do. We need an additional one. Court security, for corrections, pretrial reform did a lot of positive things. One of the things that it challenges us with, though, however, is now, whereas during COVID, a lot of our detention hearings could be via Zoom or via closed circuit television, now we are transitioning to every detainee needing to be taken in person to the Champaign County Courthouse for their detention hearing. So that requires more staff. We are balancing right now, how do we make sure that inmates who've been arrested are getting their public defender time to speak with their attorneys. They're also getting to arraignment, and so they can be released in a timely fashion if that's what the judge decides to do. We are balancing all of this, and quite honestly, we're struggling a little bit right now. Additional staffing will help. We're starting to get our numbers up in corrections, but we're also going to be adding additional inmates here at the end of the year. And so I'm putting that on our radar too. That's not I got to have this, the sky is falling, because I don't know. But I'm putting it on your radar because it's very likely we will need additional correctional staff for some of those other things that helps in the long run speed the system along, but it also takes additional resources to do so. As with my law enforcement budget, I have put in an increase in training for you to consider. We do a great job in mandatory minimum training. We do a good job in trying to expand our training as much as possible. But I want to go above and beyond what our minimum training needs to be. I want deputies and correctional officers to have the fullest training possible when they have to respond to a crisis, either in the jail, in the courthouse, or out in the community. And I think our community expects the exact same thing. And so when a crisis occurs, I want to know, because I'll tell you what, when these events happen in the last couple of months, and this is not saying anything specific to that event, but I stayed up quite a few nights worrying about, are we preparing our deputies? Are we preparing our correctional officers? And some of these decisions that I've been making are because I'm thinking, maybe, but do I want to take that chance, right? And so I think us as a county, I think the residents all want to make sure when we get there that we're responding to those situations appropriately. And so I have put in a couple of requests for additional training as well. Those are my highlights for the correctional center budget. I'm happy to take questions on that.
Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, Sheriff. I have two questions about two specific lines where I think maybe you might want more money than you're asking for. One is personnel. So your regular full-time employees, I see you kept it flat to this year's projected numbers, but won't we have more actual paid employees once we call everybody home than we've had this year, like in actual numbers?
So we budget for the number of employees we have, whether those positions are filled or not. Okay. Now, we traditionally run over in law enforcement lines with personnel and overtime and things like that, and we have been down positions in corrections to where it's kind of evened out. In fact, we usually give money back, okay. But I don't want to rely on that. As Stephanie had mentioned earlier, I would hope that we have a full staff by the end of the year, and we're not going to have extra money to rely on in that case. And that's not taking into consideration, I don't believe, contractual increases and things like that will come up as part of contract negotiations and things like that. So that's kind of why that number is steady from last year.
Okay. I was just worried that, we're actually going to have as many positions filled as possible, and we're at like $200,000 less than was approved for the 2024 budget. So
the hope is that overtime will go down a little bit as our full-time positions are up.
Okay, great. And then the other question I have is, I love the idea of out-of-county housing only being $25,000. But as we talked about before, there's a multitude of reasons why we still have to maintain some. And at $25,000 with the daily rate that we're paying Kankakee, for example, that is only 357 days. That's not enough for one inmate out of county for a whole year. Whereas if we're going to have a position for, like, let's say we have 5 that have to be out at any point in time, but a whole year's worth of 5, that would be like $127,000 at the daily rate that we're paying Kankakee right now. And so I just worry that this $25,000 isn't enough, and I'd rather plan for it sooner than plan for it when you come back and like, well, there were 18 co-defendants and we had to put them in all points in the state.
So I'm not going to tell you no if you want to give me more money there.
I'm one person.
But a couple of things that come into play there. Number one, our consolidated facility is going to have different space. And so we may be able to have that housing in a way that if we have 1 or 2, we can take care of that in-house as opposed to now we have to send to another county. The other thing is we use Kankakee, which is one of the more expensive counties, because they're the ones who can take the bulk of our inmates. Other counties in our area may have the capacity to take 1 or 2 inmates, and their rates are substantially lower. Yes. But you make a very valid point, and we never know. That's why it's so difficult, because we never know what type of inmate is going to come in and what kind of challenges or special needs they're going to have. And so it really is a guess, and I guessed based on what we had budgeted before we were housing out of county.
I hope that's true, but like even the numbers, 15 years ago when I worked in McLean County, we were paying $40 per day elsewhere, and that won't go very far with $25,000 is my worry.
Stephanie?
During the last several months, many people, including some members of the board, but just in general, kept saying, oh, when we get that $3 million back, we'll be fine. When we get that $3 million back. And first of all, we're getting 2.6 back, so that's great. I appreciate that a lot. But I also just want to reiterate, and I kept saying, no, like that's not true. We right now, and we're hoping to get this number down, are $1.1 million out of whack. And we just heard from the sheriff that he's asking for another 117 or 300,000. That's not included in that, right? With the $2.6 million being returned. So I just want to reiterate that I'm not saying I always know what I'm talking about, but sometimes I do. And the reason is I have extensive, long conversations with the different elected officials and with our finance staff about what is coming down the pike, where we're going to be seeing increases. And so I just wanted to say that, like, we're not getting $3 million of magical money back that's going to solve all of our problems. We were never going to, right? And if I sound a little bit frustrated, it is because I am, because I try to bring as much like real information into this room as I possibly can. And so I just wanted to say that like if any of us were thinking this bringing the people home, we're going to solve our budget issues, what we have seen is that is simply not the case. And that's not Dustin's fault, right, at all. That money is now spread out across the county and is really the only reason we're not facing an almost $4 million deficit this year. It is not like there is some fiscal cliff off in the future. We are standing on it. And I just want to make sure that is abundantly clear.
All right, on to the next fund.
The next ones are easy. 057, the Merit Commission. So I have a 3-member Merit Commission that sets the rules for minimum requirements for my sworn staff, correctional officers, court security, and deputies. So this is basically the fund we use for the psychological exams, for the medical exams, and the ongoing written testing process that we have before a candidate even gets considered for employment. And so we never bring in a revenue for this. Our expenditure right now is an estimate based on how many people we're going to leave versus how many people we're going to hire. 27,160. So again, I don't believe, so this is my 6th year as sheriff, and I don't believe there has been a time when we haven't pulled from the law enforcement or corrections budget toward the end of the year because we've needed more money for these things. But it's so difficult to determine that I didn't want to overestimate it. I didn't want to underestimate it. That's where we landed. The next one is 043, the Emergency Management Agency. So in fiscal year 25, we've budgeted a revenue total of about $65,100. That's from a grant, a state and federal grant that John Dwyer, my emergency management coordinator, gets. Expenditures of about $184,954. The budget includes appropriations for expected expenditures. It does not include appropriations for anything that may come as an emergency, such as a natural disaster or something like that. So if that would occur, it would easily take all of our budgets, and I would be coming back to the county board needing additional money. Now, I'm hoping that doesn't happen, but I think we've all learned with Gifford a few years ago that unexpected things happen, and we need to be prepared for whenever they do. So the Emergency Management Agency budget covers the operational expenses for our EMA.
Questions? Seeing none, move on.
Next are our special funds. 2612 is our drug forfeiture. Revenue total, we're expecting $12,000. Expenditure total about $14,300. We have a fund balance of $123,924. It's difficult to predict the number of cases that are handled that we are pursuing asset forfeiture for, because we don't pursue asset forfeiture in every single case that we may be able to. Revenues and expenditures for this are regulated by statute. In fact, for the asset forfeiture, we have to work with the state's attorney's office and the Illinois State Police in order to make that process go and us to get any of those funding. And so a lot of these funds, you will see here, if not all of them, are regulated by statute on what the income can come in and then what expenditures can go out.
Go ahead, Chris.
Just so I don't fall asleep, what do we, is there, what do you use this money for? It's money coming in, but you use it to try to get assets?
It's investigative expenses.
Okay.
So it would go for anything from supporting our investigations team to replacing a door that was knocked down as a result of a search warrant or something like that. So that's what this funding could be used for, yes.
Further questions? Moving on.
The next special revenue fund is the Cannabis Regulation Fund, and I'll be specific on this since there was a question last year about it. This revenue from this fund, comes from legal sale of cannabis that the state collects taxes on. So the county gets a certain percentage of taxes from legal sale of cannabis from the dispensaries, and then that in turn statutorily, a percentage of that comes to the sheriff's office. And so that's where we see our anticipated revenue of $50,500. Our expenditure total balanced out at $50,500. Our fund balance is $145,402. The thing you need to keep in mind is this fund is relatively new. And so we haven't wanted to commit anything that was an ongoing expense without knowing that we're going to be able to support that in the future. Revenues, I already mentioned that. Expenditures are related by state statute. Expenditures have to be for the enforcement or prevention of the illegal cannabis drug trade. And so anything prevention related, anything enforcement related, these funds can be used on. However, they can't be used just as general fund items. The statute's very specific about those uses.
Not seeing any more questions.
Next one is Jail Commissary 2658. We are expecting revenue totals of $131,000, expenditures of about $115,000. Now this one we have a pretty good fund balance here, $795,000. I would say that once we get the consolidated facility open, we are going to be looking at new ways to provide for inmate programs, inmate needs, which is what this fund goes for. We collect these funds from certain things that inmates purchase, but the requirement is that all of that money has to go back towards inmate welfare. And so we remodeled a classroom a couple of years ago with funding like this. And so though it's included in the the infrastructure project, I believe, for renovation of the current medical facility when that's moved. If not, if we need to purchase anything for that, likely it will come out of inmate commissary. So these things are regulated by statute too. They have to be used for something inmate welfare related.
Jail medical costs.
This is probably one of the most simplest ones. It's a pass-through fund. We get $10,010 into this fund every year, and that's passed through to our medical expenses, which is why we don't have a very big fund balance on here, $3,340. I will say that nowhere near covers our medical expenses. Prescriptions and other types of medical expenses cost us about $60,000 a year with our current inmate population, and our medical contract is like $1.2 million every year for inmate medical contract. And so this is a little teeny tiny drop in the big pond of medical expenses that the jail actually has to take care of our inmates.
Stephanie.
Sorry, going back to the jail commissary fund balance, do you anticipate the project that you may do being a 2025 project?
I think that, I don't know.
Okay.
Right now, I do not have something in mind, but I
Okay.
think anything that costs a substantial amount of money will be something we have to plan out for at least several months.
Okay, because I guess my question is, I mean, there's two ways we could do it. We could just budget it, take $500,000 and put it into the budget, or we could just wait for you to come and do a mid-year, fund balance request. I'm fine with either way. I leave it to you, good people, to decide which way makes the most sense.
There is no downside, in my opinion, to budgeting more. Because this money is earmarked already for those purposes, and if we don't use it, it just goes back into fund balance.
Right, and that's to some degree what we're doing with public safety sales tax for the JANO replacement in anticipation. If we can get the project up and running, we'll have the money there. If not, it'll fall back down to fund balance and we'll appropriate it again the next year. And I feel like that's how we do like half of our highway money every year. So again, that's way above my pay grade, but I don't think there'd be anybody on the board who would look at you sideways if you asked for that. I don't know. If you would, look at him sideways.
I'm used to it.
Any more questions for our sheriff?
Thank you all very much.
Moving on, go to the circuit clerk's office. Welcome, Susan.
Good evening. Take this away. Sorry, there was a jury summons questionnaire in the podium, and I think I'm going to take that away because it's got somebody's private information on it. So, it's gone. You never saw it. So, because I know you all can read and you have a lot of experience in reading budgets, I never come here with slides that repeat everything that's in my budget. It's a waste of your time, and I think it's more important to talk about some of the challenges that we face and what we're looking at in fiscal year 2025. I am probably one of the few department heads who is not coming to you to ask for more people. And that's for two reasons. First, I don't want to ask you for money you don't have. Secondly, I want to see what the impact is going to be of the e-citation project and how that allows me to shift around some responsibilities within the office when that happens. We're looking at e-citation not actually starting probably until March or April, so I won't have a full year of that under my belt when I come to you next year. But I do think that will help us address some other needs that we do have before I come to you next year and say, now we've had this experimentation, now we know what we're doing in terms of people that we need for the extra appeals that are caused by the new elimination of bond, by other kinds of requirements from the Administrative Office of the Illinois Courts and the Illinois Supreme Court. When I first started, we had reports A through J. Now we have reports A through P, and we also have 6 other reports that we have to make to them that are very detailed, and very time consuming. My overtime budget, since people have asked about that, is $5,000. That's it. And we use the $5,000 and we use it judicially, but you're looking at your overtime staff right here. I am the overtime. So once that $5,000 is gone, there isn't additional money to spend on staff to be able to take care of those needs. So that, again, as the sheriff has said, it's always a good idea to let you all know in advance what things may come up in the future. And so these are things that may come up in the future depending on what the needs of the office are. So we've talked about challenges in my slides. The loss of revenue is a significant challenge, and we talked about this last year as well. And it is for the county. It's not just for my office. It is for every office in the county that receives money from fines and fees, which is every office in the courthouse, also the Child Advocacy Center, also every police agency in Champaign County. And so we can see the declining revenues this year coming from the loss of bond revenue that happened with the Safety Act that started on September 18th, which was a weird date, but that's the compromise date they reached. And then also with a waiver of criminal fines and assessments created by Supreme Court Rule 404. So I think overall for our county, although this is an estimate right now, you're estimating a loss of about $1 million between those monies that are not coming to us anymore. That's not, again, just me. That's for everybody who receives monies from this. The purpose of these acts was really good. Nobody wants to have the courthouse operations funded by fines and fees and filing fees, and the Supreme Court and the legislature has responded to that. The problem is they didn't respond to the other side, which is what happens when that revenue goes away. That is probably something we need to, not probably, that is something we do need to talk to our legislative representatives and senators about, because I don't think this is a sustainable model when we don't have that replacement revenue. And what I didn't put in as a challenge here is I do foresee that the Supreme Court will continue to cut filing fees and other types of revenue that we have available, not, again, just for my office, but for the courthouse in general, because that is the trend now. And so that is something to monitor as we go through fiscal year 25. Next. So this has been a challenge since I started in 2020. Besides all the other things that happened, we're running out of room. The implementation of e-filing has not really addressed all the paper files we still have. And that's for two reasons. One is folks can come and file things over the counter. Not everybody has the ability to do their stuff by computer. And so there are mechanisms for people to be able to file their things on paper without having to go through the electronic filing process. So we have the worst of both worlds when we have both electronic and paper all together in a lot of these cases. And state law and Supreme Court rule requires us to keep a whole lot of papers that are from old court cases, some of them forever. And if you go down to the dark and scary basement, which is where we have our storage, or you look at the shelving areas in the office where we have some of the overflow there, you can see what I mean about the amount of paper that our office has to store. What we haven't been able to address is what can we do to start digitizing, that word I trip over every time, in order to get rid of these paper documents. What I have asked the board to consider as a separate ask is not permanent staff for this, but to look at the possibility of having an outside vendor come and help us with the digitization process. I'm going to get that word right. And I understand that may not happen this year, but I think that if it doesn't happen this year, I would invite you to come and see what I'm talking about, because I think in future years you will see why that is so important. The problem is As these papers get older, they're fragile. The files that they're in are fragile. The way that they were maintained in the olden days are fragile. And so I worry about the loss of the documents just physically because we're not able to store them properly. We owe a big thank you to the Urbana Free Library for storing some of our documents. We pay them a pittance, frankly, to do this. Even this year, with the small increase that they've asked for, it's less than $15,000 to store a whole bunch of files that people actually want access to. So when I told you all last year that Stephanie Fortato was one of the folks that came in and researched files in our courthouse, people go to the library to do genealogy research, historical research. They look at all kinds of files that are at the Urbana Library that, by the way, they maintain in very pristine rooms, air-conditioned or heated as the case may need to be, in an accessible way that people can get to. And that is a problem for patrons now. When folks come in and ask for their grandma's will, which we hope is downstairs in a way that we can get to it, sometimes they have to wait for a few days or even a couple of weeks sometimes to be able to get grandma's will. It's not readily accessible. There are other things going on that people have to be attentive to with some of our new rules that we've just talked about. Having things digitized would mean that there are records available to folks when they actually need them so that they don't have to wait. The other thing, of course, that we talked about previously, and again, Stephanie has mentioned that this evening, is we are ready to move on to the next phase of the Barry Dunn proposal to look at what it would take to get ready a request for proposal on that court case management system. I will tell you, in all the years I've dealt with consultants, they're the best I've dealt with by far. I have been really impressed by the time and energy and research they've devoted to help us with this project. And we cannot do what happened 21 years ago, which is people got together and did the best job that they could to issue that RFP. This system is too sophisticated and the needs are too great for a bunch of people to get together who don't know a lot. And that includes me, by the way. I don't know everything there is to know about the court case management system. And I think having an investment in the people that can help us get to that next step is vital to us doing the next thing that we need to do. We have had a couple of counties that have tried to do this RFP on their own for their new court case management system, and I think they're finding that that didn't work so well. McLean County is one of those that is having a problem as a result of that. And they're a county I look to most times to see what other folks are doing. So that may be something that I don't want to copy them with. So that's why we ask for that. So the fund changes, the reason you're not seeing as many funds from my office as you used to is because last year you all helped me work that out so that we could combine some of these things, frankly, to prepare for the fact that revenue was going to decline in some of these special funds. And so that's what we've done here. There's a couple I had to keep separate. E-citation can only be used for that purpose. The Child Support Services Fund can only be used for that purpose. The Automation Fund can only be used for that purpose, and also it has to be a fund that we get permission of the court to spend monies out of. So those three things are still separate, but everything else now is mushed together. The admin services folks have recommended a move that we endorse, which is to think about the possibility of moving JANO costs to the Public Safety Fund so that we can think about real capital asset replacement in the future. That's just something for you all to consider, as we don't have it cast in stone, but I thought it was a great idea. And just so you know, I still look for money, not like shaking down my sofa cushions, but this is the equivalent to shaking down my sofa cushions, is to look for money. We're also asking for money from different sources for what it is that we need. I will be approaching, if AOIC has another fund available this year for technical support, which they've been doing in alternating years, I am going to go back to them to ask for money for digitization. But as you see, I ask for money for different things from different sources all the time. And also, just to remind you, I squeeze pennies. So if we don't need stuff, then we don't have it anymore. So when I decided that there were some positions that we didn't need anymore, that were the non-union positions, I got rid of them. So this is just to let you know, I think about this all the time. It may be a detriment in certain ways to what we do within the office, because of course I would like to have more people. But I also recognize that it's my responsibility as a department head to not waste your money and to do things that I can do to help contribute to the bottom line. So that's what this is. And that's it. Thank you for everything you've done to help our office. Somebody did ask this the other day, and I did want to report to you that we do have 5 vacancies now. This year, for the first time ever, we were actually fully staffed from January through June. It was hooray time. But things are happening. People are, we had one person go on to the state's attorney's office. We had 2 people go on to law school. I'm pretty proud of that. And we had a couple of people move on to other internship opportunities. And so this is, again, nothing worrisome yet. Just want to let you know that if I have to come back and talk to you about that later. And that's it.
Questions? Chris?
The issue of trying to preserve historical information is not unfamiliar with me. I've been dealing with this even as late as early as the 1970s. And I know that the recorder is also trying to is there a formal or informal group among different county and even area agencies that might kind of, where we might kind of develop some sort of a service that can kind of do some of this digitizing?
There is a hodgepodge of rules that govern how everybody keeps their records. The hodgepodge consists of what we have to do when reporting to other agencies such as the Supreme Court about records that we want to destroy through the digitization process. At one point, there was some consideration of having the state library come into play here to do something about the needs of preserving these records, but that kind of went the way of the wind. That was before COVID, and we never heard anything about that again. It would make sense because logically they are the state agency that's in charge of record preservation, but so far that has not proven to be the case. And unfortunately, the requirements for everybody's record preservation is different. And so even for those of us who want to cooperate in that effort, it's hard because our rules are different about the records we're supposed to be preserving. So we've talked about that as a clerks association group and how people are doing it. But there is no central mechanism yet that helps us make that happen. And digitization is expensive. It's money.
Stephanie?
To continue this digitization conversation, so looking at your full slide, to digitize everything you want digitized is almost $700,000, and you're asking for the $200,000 piece. This is the kind of expense that we'd like to put on something like the public safety sales fund balance, because it's a one-time expense. It's not recurring. That's the reason you beef up that fund balance to do a project like this. I want to speak to Chris's point. I do think digitization is very expensive, but it's important to spend that amount of money because if you try to kind of hodgepodge it, and we saw this, and this is no shade at the previous recorder's office, he was doing some of the digitization kind of in-house a little bit.
Right.
And what we found is when we then went to the usefulness of that material that had been digitized on the back end, it wasn't, we had to re-digitize some of that because essentially it just wasn't digitized in a way that you could do searches and like there's standards for that you have to be able to employ in order for it to actually be helpful for staff. Now, listen, he was trying to do it before ARPA and, you know, shout out to him for like trying to figure that out, but like in a landscape of not having the ARPA money. And so that's how we were able to do the clerk, some stuff in the treasurer. This is me looking at Michelle and Travis.
Yeah, we did a variety of offices in the first go-round, and we actually will need to talk about the second go-round, probably at the Special Finance Committee meeting. On the docket now is the entire recorder's vault, which is well over 2,000 books of deeds and plats and whatnot, and a couple other, the entire coroner's office, some other things like that. And then in conjunction with that, I believe MC, I know he has been researching and I think he's identified the content management system that we want to use because this is a two-pronged effort, right? So you can scan the documents that does not satisfy the state record retention requirements. You have to put it into a content management system where it can't be deleted, it can't be edited, and it has to be stored in a way that essentially if you got a FOIA, you could run a search and the appropriate documents would be pulled up. So we've made significant progress on this, and I think we'll make even more progress next year. And with the public safety sales tax increase, ideally this is something that we would be putting money towards every year for quite a few years, and then maybe at that point being able to reduce it down to a maintenance so that every year we can keep up with scanning new documents, but we're not continuing to be scanning roomfuls of 30-year-old documents. And I do see that future being a possibility.
If you could bring that data to, I think that some sort of decision point on this for that public, for the special finance meeting might be useful. You know, maybe we could use some of the ARPA interest money, or do you know what I mean, to try to do a piece. I do actually think this is super important. As somebody who has done research, and listen, I was just writing like a history musical, so like my urgency wasn't really high. I was terrified of like turning the page in some of these books because I could hear them crinkle, you know what I mean? And that's just me doing this like little history project. Imagine if that was something you needed in order to, you know, track down something that mattered to you legally, right? It's not a good situation to be in. And I think that this digitization saves staff time and makes us more efficient. And it also saves public time. It makes our documents more accessible to the public. So I think this, personally, I think this is something we should prioritize.
In its history, I mean, our records go back to the founding of the county. And every time I go downstairs to look at some of the older documents that we have there, it is a walk through the history of our county. It's just very important.
Also, one other, sorry, really quick thing, the $68,000 you need for the RFP, that's budgeted. Right, right. I just want to make sure. So that is not an outstanding request.
Yay.
We have that, and we have enough money. If you get the RFP out fast, you could start in 2026. So we've got money for you to get started if you want to.
We were going to start in 2025.
2025, that's what I mean. We have money for you to start in 2025 in the budget.
And I have talked to the Barry Dunn people to confirm that they can hit the ground running on this in January, and they can. So we're good.
Further questions for Susan? Thank you very much, Susan.
Thank you so much.
Next is the Circuit Court, Judge Rosenbaum. Welcome.
Good evening. Two preliminary things. First of all, we're not asking for more money. We're not asking for new staff, so hopefully that will shorten your questions for me. The other thing is not so good. The slides, I don't know if you have copies of the slides or not. Oh, you do? Okay. They were done kind of the last second. Some of the numbers are not correct, and so I apologize. It's not my fault, but I take responsibility. The buck stops with me, so I'm sorry. But the numbers in the regular budget materials are actually correct, and we're really not asking for new money or anything like that. But the slides themselves, some of the numbers are slightly off. The first budget we have is just our general fund, which is healthy, and those numbers are pretty accurate. They're only about $15,000 or $20,000 off on the expenditure totals. We're functioning pretty well in the courthouse, I really have to say. It's been very helpful to us that we've gotten a 12th judge with the 12th clerk, actually 13th clerk we have. But we don't have the space, and I know you know that. When we got this position, you knew at some point down the road, and we're going to have more space, however you end up configuring it. I don't think it's something that can be done in the next year, but I certainly encourage this board to at least start the process of thinking out loud about what our options are, so that we're not, starting the process in 2 or 3 years down the road. I would note that this really does cause a lot of problems, not just for the judges and the clerks, but the lawyers and the litigants. Today, we have 2 judges who share a courtroom, and one of the judges had to set a 4-day trial. And she gave me the order that she entered. And on a 4-day trial, it's going to take place over 7 days in 3 different courtrooms, starting at various times throughout the day. People are messing things up all the time. Docket entries are confusing. It's just really not good for anybody. So whatever we can do to encourage the board to start discussing possible plans, which we know will take some time, we're happy to do that. The law library, which we had, was a very nice space with lots of bookshelves. We had to turn that into the judge's office in his clerk's space. So the law library was moved into sort of the near the Lincoln area and the jury assembly area on the first floor. We have gotten some grant funding. As Susan McGrath indicated, we've been working with the clerk on some of these funds. We have increased our technology purchases. We also got a grant that will allow us to put online research for pro se people into that area where some books are near the Lincoln area. We have just started a small claims mediation program with DRI. It's free to the county. It's free to all the litigants. We've worked with them with the mortgage foreclosure, and it's a wonderful program. In terms of the CMS case management system, we, as well as the circuit clerk, are anxious to keep moving that forward. It's good to hear that it's in the budget for next year. I'm not really sure it should be in any particular department's budget. It seems like it's in the circuit clerks. It's really just something that I think the county needs to pay because it affects many, many different programs and offices. And finally, we're hoping to apply in the next couple of days for a facility dog. There was a number of courthouses in the state have one. Sometimes it's run by the court. Sometimes it's run by the state's attorney's office or Children's Advocacy Center. Just today, there was an email blurb about Lake County just getting a facility dog, and it's already wonderful. It will be somebody who's housed at the courthouse, who's owned by an employee, comes in every day and is available for jurors or witnesses to pet and take care of some of their anxieties. Certainly the state's attorney's office, public defender, probation could have access to this dog as well. So, and that should be of no cost to the county at all. Any questions about the general fund? All right. The next fund is the jury commission. Those numbers are slightly off. I apologize. Right now we have the jury commission and the grand jury, which meet out here at Brookins. And the jury commission is when people are trying to get out of jury duty. Once a month they come in and tell their story. The grand jury meets out here every 2 weeks. It's a state's attorney's process of getting indictments against individuals. We're hoping that once we're going to keep using Brookins, and after Brookins, we're hoping we can use county board space if available at the Bennett Building or where else. In terms of the jury trials, the number of trials we had last year were pretty high. We had 41 that went to verdict, including criminal and some civil. The vast majority are criminal cases. This year, as of today, we've done 19, and there's still 4 months to go, so the number's going down. Can't really explain it. It's just sort of the cycle of how cases work. But that's what the jury commission is. Any questions about the jury commission? The law library, again, those numbers are just slightly off by about $1,000 or so. As I indicated, the law library is now a judge's quarters. The physical law library with a few books are in the outside the jury assembly room. And as I indicated, the Access to Justice grant is allowing us to have public access in the circuit clerk's viewing room, which will let people look up on Westlaw. They can look up criminal cases, civil cases, and do their own legal research free of charge. We're also looking to come up with some no-cost family law mediation services. We tried to get some money for a grant. We didn't get that much from the grant for that purpose, but we're going to try and do that as well. So we can have a mediator outside the courtroom in the hotly contested family law cases to kind of help resolve things quickly and efficiently without getting the court time involved. Any questions about the law library? Specialty courts, those numbers are slightly off as well. I apologize again. Last year we did get the Adult Redeploy Illinois grant. It goes on the state's fiscal year, which is kind of a problem in terms of reporting, but it's July to June. That first year we were given $400,000. We had a lot of snafus with some staffing issues and some other issues with respect to filling out all the forms and all of that. So we really only used about $7,000 to $8,000 last year. We were reviewed again, and we got another $400,000 this year. We're already using the money, and we're hoping to use a fair amount of that. Part of that is going to be for staffing for new attorneys for the state's attorney's office and public defender's office. The drug court coordinator salary is reimbursed by the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts, but this could also be used for housing for individuals, for residential placement and the like. And this can also be used to help finally develop a mental health court, which we are working seriously towards starting up here in the near future. One of our biggest obstacles has been to find providers who could do it for the money we need and provide the resources that we need. But we are going to make a serious effort to get this going in the near future. Any questions about the specialty courts budget? No? All right.
Dr. Storr.
No particular questions, but I'm glad to hear that there's progress towards trying to establish a mental health court. What sorts of expenses do you anticipate that might be needed from the county
For a mental health
for
court?
a mental health court?
Well, this ARI grant can be for all specialty courts. So hopefully it won't cost the county anything. I can't promise you that, but we know it can go for new staff. I can tell you right now that we would have to find some service providers, perhaps a psychologist or a psychiatrist who can work for us part-time, perhaps a social worker as well. I can tell you that probation would, they're overwhelmed. We only have one probation officer right now to do drug court, and I'm sure Shannon, Ms. Siders behind me, is going to be saying if we get a mental health court, we would need another probation officer, which I would agree we would need. But we're hopeful that the ARI grant would be able to cover all of that. They would also have to provide services such as classes and coursework and things like that. Hopefully nothing from the county. That's our goal.
Stephanie.
How confident are you in the recurring nature of those grant funds? Like, is that something we're going to get every year?
You have to apply every year. They're on a 3-year cycle. However, I know counties that have been receiving it for decades. And so I think that if we can show that we're productive, we're using it appropriately, I don't foresee them cutting it.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thank you, Judge Rosenbaum, for being here tonight. This is just a general question for try to improve my knowledge here. So we added a 12th judge. What would cause us to need a 13th, and do you ever go from a 12 to an 11? I know that's probably a ridiculous question. Would you ever go from 12 to 11? What would cause us to go from 12 to 13?
Well, you hear everybody saying there's more work, more obligations due to statutes and everything else. It's very easy to say that we could right now have use a 13th judge. I don't foresee our General Assembly giving us a 13th judge. I just don't see that happening. It was pure luck in a little bit, well, I'm just going to say it's pretty much luck that we got this 12th judge, because it was a special provision in the statute for the Supreme Court to give us an extra spot. To really get another spot or more, it would have to really, for the most part, come from the General Assembly. I don't envision them giving us another spot, but if you all want to talk to them and try and give us one, that would be great. I think we're doing fine with 12. Do the judges have a lot of work? Yes, but so do the public defenders, so do the prosecutors, so does everybody else. I think we're fine with 12. Could there be a time down the road when we continue to grow, when we continue to have more litigation, greater population? Could we use a 13th down the road? I could foresee that, but in the time I'm presiding judge, I'm not going to be asking for a 13th.
So then it's General Assembly-based decision processes, or is it based on the county saying, I really need another judge?
So there's two kinds of judges. One are circuit judges who are elected. That is created by statute. The General Assembly can essentially say, Champaign County, you get 6. Oh, wait, you're busy. We're going to give you a 7th. They can literally change it county by county or circuit by circuit if they want to. The other kind of judge is associate judge, which currently is based on population. For every, I'm thinking 33 or 35,000 people in a circuit, you get an associate judge. So that gets us 6, 7 for the circuit. I don't see that changing either.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Stephanie.
I do want to point out, and this is something I do really appreciate, although it's given us facility logistical nightmares, I do appreciate your advocacy in getting us to that 13th, the 12th judge. I like the saying, justice delayed is justice denied, and for all people that are, involved. And if there's, judges only have so many hours in a day. And so if they're booked out, that means your case takes longer, right? If the state's attorney doesn't have enough people, if the public defender doesn't have enough people, that just means, and that does come at not just an expense to the people that we're trying to serve, but it also comes at an expense to us. Because if the people that are incarcerated because they were not eligible for release, right, we are housing those people. So every day that their trial is delayed because we're one judge short of, like, we could have heard another whole day's worth of trial. We could have started another 4-day trial. That some of those costs are actually direct costs to us. I agree with you. We got to figure out how we're going to staff all of this. And again, while we were able to get the judge in our last budget, a admin person, we have not given the new judge a bailiff, like somebody from the sheriff's office, right?
That's right.
And that's in part because we don't have another courtroom right now. But if we did figure out the space need, we would then have a recurring cost for another courthouse person from the sheriff's office. So all of these things, all of the options cost money, right? I think our goal is to try to figure out how do we ensure that we're providing the best possible service for the public, whether it's somebody waiting for justice in their case or somebody waiting to find out, if they're waiting, being incarcerated. Our goal should be to try to shorten that up as much as possible. And I also just wanted to publicly commend you. I know that you have been clearing, trying to get through this backlog of cases that we had, that because of some of the things that happened a few years. And I do appreciate the work that all of you have been putting in the whole entire system to try to get as much of that cleared up as possible.
Well, I'm just a part of it. It's the lawyers who really have worked really hard to get that stuff done. So, all right, the final budget we have is the foreclosure mediation. This is where people pay $100 it's a fee. And then we use Dispute Resolution Institute, who we're now also using for the small claims mediation. There's no cost to the litigants, and it does really help people resolve their cases, oftentimes with evictions and mortgage foreclosure issues. So it's been very effective. There's really not much to this budget, and the fund balance isn't very large, but there really is no cost to us. Any questions about any of the budgets?
Thank you very much,
Thank
Randy.
you very much. Have a good
Appreciate your time. Next is JDC and Director Siders.
I've been sitting too long and I can't feel my feet. So, hello. First, we have the Juvenile Detention Center. For those of you who aren't aware, the Administrative Office of Illinois Courts does provide reimbursement for all the salaries at the Juvenile Detention Center. So everything is covered, and the county covers it, and then AOIC reimburses for the salaries there, other than overtime and any comp time payouts and those kinds of payouts. The salaries are reimbursed by AOIC. Everything is a flat for the detention center other than the medical contract, which we piggyback with the Sheriff's Department, and the food contract also piggyback with the Sheriff's Department, so there are contractual increases there. Our department typically does not ask for a lot. I've gone back and I've looked. I've been doing my research today, and our full-time employees has stayed the same since 2016. We haven't asked for any increases since then. I am asking for a few things this year. The first one is for a dedicated PREA coordinator for the Juvenile Detention Center. PREA, that is the Prison Rape Elimination Act. I believe you guys have those requests? Yes? Okay. So I will not read those super thoroughly, but I will tell you, we currently have a supervisor serving as our PREA coordinator. She's here with us today, Assistant Superintendent Laura Hawk, and then the Superintendent Patricia Allah is also here with me. What is happening right now is Laura is serving as our PREA coordinator. Laura also has many other duties that she has to do as a supervisor at the Juvenile Detention Center, and she does not have adequate time to fully dedicate towards our PREA compliance at the detention center. We need someone who can full-time work on PREA only. So we need to develop policies, we need to develop training, we need to figure out what our building needs to be able to be in PREA compliance. We are doing our best right now to be in compliance with PREA, and we are working to make improvements. We have a policy, but it's one big, long policy that needs to be broken down into, shorter, more efficient policies. So this person would have the dedicated time to strictly work on PREA. Laura has to cover shift this weekend because somebody's on vacation. So she's covering for other supervisors when they're off. She's also in charge of the schedule. She's in charge of our interns, our programming, our volunteers. She has many other duties in addition to the work she does relating to PREA. If we have an investigation that needs to be completed related to PREA, that's very time consuming. So that would be if a complaint was made against a staff member regarding a sexual abuse in the facility. So as you can imagine, that's obviously a very important task, and I need someone who can fully dedicate time to that, not having to worry about, oh, well, I can't worry about that right now because I've got to work tonight because I'm covering for the night shift supervisor who's on vacation. So getting a PREA coordinator would benefit the county in many different ways. I think it would reduce our liability. If we have someone dedicated and making appropriate policies and getting our staff trained, as well as our juveniles in custody. We have had some PREA-related complaints this year that have been completely unfounded, and we need to be able to know what sanctions we could impose on those juveniles for making those false reports. So there are some things that we need to be able to improve upon, and I think having a dedicated PREA coordinator to be able to do this would tremendously help. It would help our perception in the community. I don't know that AOIC can force us to become PREA certified, so there's PREA compliance and then there's PREA certification. So there's another request in there to take the steps that we would need to take to try to get PREA certified. So that involves a pre-audit, so we'd have an inspector come, kind of look through the facility, kind of help us figure out what we would need to do to be ready for the audit. Then you get an audit, and then there's a post-audit where they go through all the recommendations that were made to say, okay, well, you need to fix this, and you need to fix this. All of that costs money. And we already know one thing that needs to be done. We need some doors on the shower and bathroom areas at the detention center. For those of you who have been, you kind of maybe remember what I'm talking about. There are bathrooms and shower areas. There's a shower curtain, but then there's a toilet and a sink, and so there's no door there. So that's kind of an open area. And so if someone is using the bathroom and somebody's walking by, everybody can see them sitting on the toilet. So we would need to get doors to shield those areas. So in the request, there's, I think it's $119,000 for the doors. This would be the steps that we need to take to get PREA certified. So a coordinator, if we got a coordinator, they could help us get all the policies in place, start making those corrections, and then eventually we would want to try to get certified. So if we have to choose, between one of these two items, right now I would ask to get the coordinator. We can start taking some of the smaller steps and figure out what exactly we would need to do and get the trainings done, and then maybe down the road, if it's not possible for next year to do the actual budget request for the items to get certified, then I would ask for that potentially down the road. So right now, out of those two requests, I would prefer that we focus on the coordinator, but I just want you to be aware that there will be, if we were trying to get PREA certified, which would kind of put us gold standard of juvenile detention centers. There are currently 3 juvenile detention centers throughout the state that are PREA certified, and then there are additional 2 who are going through that process right now. So if we wanted to get to where we were in the gold standard of juvenile detention centers best practices, we would want to try to get certified in the future. But it is going to cost us some money, and I know that's not necessarily in the cards maybe right now, but I think the coordinator would help us to at least get to improve how we are currently doing with regards to PREA. So those are my requests for the detention center. Other news regarding the detention center, I'm sure you're wondering, is staffing. I was gonna be able to tell you, I thought, that we had 5 male vacancies. We unfortunately had someone resign on Monday morning with 30 minutes notice prior to their shift and then no notice. So if they were supposed to be there Monday morning at 7 a.m., they resigned Monday morning at 6:30 with no notice. So we do have another female already. Females, that was a female. So we have females ready to go. We have a female who is slated to go for a psych next month already. We had an interview with a male today who currently lives in Utah but is returning to the area in October, so we liked him. We have another couple male applicants that we are setting up for interviews. So staffing continues to be a challenge at the detention center. We're working on a video. We are using the same provider that the Sheriff's Department used, that Michelle got us hooked up with to do a video. So we've shot a recruitment video. So I'm hoping that will help. We are working with Karen Sims, if you guys are familiar with her, on the culture in the building, trying to kind of make improvements there. She's done some stress reduction stuff with our staff. We are getting ready to kind of do like an informal EAP with her, where she's going to because she's met our staff now, she's going to come and kind of talk to our staff and be available to speak to our staff. And then she's going to continue to do some one-on-one and kind of group conversations without supervisors present to see if there are culture issues there that she can get information from them on. So that's what we're working on to try to make improvements. Questions about the detention center?
Jamala.
Thank you. Hi, Shannon. How are you?
Hi. Good.
Good. I'm sorry, I don't remember the lady's name in the back. But if you make her the coordinator, you'll have to replace her, I'm assuming.
She doesn't want to be the coordinator.
Oh, no. Oh, I'm sorry.
Because it's a lot of policy writing, and that's not really what she wants. So we would have to post this and try to find somebody. And honestly, it's going to be a challenge. Because you have to find somebody who wants to write policies and wants to do investigations on these kinds of claims. And that's a hard sell. There are people out there who are interested in that kind of work, but we Laura would stay where she's at and just do her, her other duties, and then we would find somebody, hopefully somebody fabulous to do this position. Yep.
Jenny?
Do you think the pursuing the PREA certification would help with the staffing issues? Would that attract more staff if you're a certified facility, or does that just not have an effect on it?
I don't know if the people who are applying for our position are pay attention or even aware of that going into applying. I mean, I think it certainly sells us to other facilities and to, you know, groups, advocacy groups. Detention centers get a lot of, there's a lot of information out there about detention centers. There's a lot of people who are constantly kind of looking at what we're doing. There was a shooting in the Sangamon County Juvenile Detention Center last year. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but last October, there was actually a shooting in a detention center. And if you've ever been in a detention center or worked in a detention center, it's very horrifying to think of how something like that happened in a detention center. And so anything we can do to, you know, improve what we're putting out there is a good thing. But I don't know that our normal person applying for a job would really know to pay attention to that.
Stephanie?
First, Shannon, I wanted to, there's a lot of things in the county that make me not sleep. Your division is probably one of them the most, and I want to commend you for you trying to keep the wheels on a bus. It's very hard to, this is emotionally tough work that has tough schedules, kind of very similar to what we were talking about with the coroner's office. And when you have an unpredictable schedule and late night shifts on top of the emotional weight, right, it's a lot. And we've had a waiver for a while that our people don't have to have bachelor's degrees, but that's not a forever thing. Right? And that's one of the ways we've been able to keep the wheels on the bus. But I want to commend you, first of all, because you've been carrying a lot, I think, for the county, and your predecessor was as well.
Yeah, thank you. My staff work very hard. And I will tell you, I mean, there have been days this week, today is only Tuesday, where we've only had 2 people working at the detention center. And one person who started 3 weeks ago. So I can't really count her. Right. And so we've got supervisors. It's kind of all hands on deck when things like that are happening. And yeah, it gets exhausting constantly from day to day trying to figure out, oh wait, we've got to take 2 people to court, or oh, we've got to go do this, and trying to figure out who's going to do that. It does get exhausting.
I want to mention too that at least my understanding is that your expenses would be eligible under PSST. Is that correct if we expanded?
Yeah, it's detention.
Right. So I look at things in like 2 separate pots, recurring and not recurring. The thing that I think that it's really possible maybe we could do this year is the doors, because it's not recurring, right? And so I personally would like to see that piece on the decision point for the board. So I just want to kind of give you a tally of decision point things that I've mentioned. One, this is a must. We have to decide we're deficit budgeting. We have to decide where that's coming from. What fund balance are we paying that out of once we have a firmer decision on what that dollar amount's going to be. 2, the sergeant upgrade for the sheriff, which is recurring but is happening, right? And we have to decide, are we going to ask the sheriff to swallow that, or are we going to fund it for him? 3, we've asked for funding, a decision point for some sort of landscape for the digitization piece, specifically maybe starting the circuit clerk upon that. And then 4, the doors. But let me be clear, that's just what I would like to see. This board is a collective. So if there are things that you want to see, right, on that decision-making day in late September, you don't have to just say that now, but you need to articulate that to these good people up here so that they could have all the data ready and everything like that. And I'm going to be honest, until we know about PSST, for me, recurring costs are going to be the thing that I'm going to be like, yo, we got to pump the brakes. If there are things that we could do that aren't recurring, that would make life better, and the doors to me seem like I could like maybe something that would make an immediate difference while we're trying to do the rest of this. But I just wanted to throw that out there. I feel like I've been saying a lot of things I want on that day, but y'all might have other things that you want. Speak up, right? Either in these meetings, if you're like, I want to see that, I want the board to make a decision on that, because if not, I want to be really clear, if we don't hear that, the budget that we're going to be voting on is what's in this book, right? So if there's something that you're hearing that you want on that day, you either in this meeting or sometime between now and that September meeting need to let Travis and Michelle know so they could cost it out and, you know, have all the data that you need. And please don't wait till like 2 days before the meeting. Get it to them as soon as possible.
Go ahead, JJ.
Hi, Shannon.
Hi.
So I just want to make sure that everybody understands the wages for the PREA coordinator would be reimbursable from AOIC.
So yeah, I was going to make that point as well. So it's we're kind of in a weird, you know, they're going to probably wait on you and go back and forth kind of thing. So I will be asking AOIC to reimburse for this position as well. So I have an annual plan that I have to have done. It's supposed to be done by the end of this week. So I've already written the same language into my annual plan. So I'll be requesting from AOIC that they will give us reimbursement for this position, which would mean the county would just be liable for the benefits. But, you know, whether or not they will do that or not, I don't know, right?
But the track record is pretty good on them reimbursing us for these positions.
Yes, but they also, you know, don't want to say, you know, they're saying that they're not adding any more positions right now. So I don't know.
So with that reimbursement, the county's impact would be $26,000 a year, not $96,000.
Yeah.
Jenny.
Back to doors. This is probably more of a question for Michelle and Travis. Is this the kind of thing that I know you've got a passel of projects that are ready to go if there's any ARPA money that comes back? Is this the kind of thing that could live on that list as well? Is it like, because that's like, I want doors.
How much for the doors?
It was 119?
I mean, honestly, I would say at 119 to take that out of the fund balance of the public safety sales tax, because it's a one-time cost, and compared to the 2 million that's sitting there, it's not a significant amount.
Okay.
The ARPA funds, we're down to interest,
Okay.
which does not have ARPA regulations on it, so you have a lot more flexibility in what you can do with that money. And because this request fits directly into what the public safety sales tax can cover, it seems like let's make an easy expenditure on something we know that's approved and used our really free-form money for other things that might be more difficult to justify.
Okay. But there is still awareness of projects like that you have that are ready to go should any funds get scraped back.
Oh, yes.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And we will, the special finance committee meeting, we will have an entire ARPA section. We may have a few decision points. Kathy and I have really been hounding some of our grantees, so hopefully not, but I'm not making any promises at this point, so.
Further questions? Okay, on to court services.
Okay, so this is the probation side of things. So on the probation side of things, the funding for that we get from AOIC for the staff is a little bit different. Not all probation, we don't get full funding for all probation staff. We have 14 positions in probation where we only get $1,000 a month from AOIC. They're called salary subsidy. The state AOIC is trying to do away with those throughout the state. So any positions that are added moving forward are never salary subsidy positions if they do fund any new positions. So we have 14 positions in probation that we get $1,000 a month for. I am going to be asking in this annual plan for them to convert some of those to full funding grants and aid positions, because we have 14, which is more than some other jurisdictions. So I am going to be asking AOIC to convert some of those 14 positions to get us full funding for those positions. So that's going into my annual plan as well. So the 14 positions, just getting the $1,000 a month. The other positions in probation, we get the full funding, just like for the detention positions. So the probation budget itself in the 1080 account is 98% personnel. I am asking for 2 additional probation officer positions. You should have those requests in your packets. One would be potentially for a mental health court. We don't have the staff to add on to anybody's caseload right now. And as I'm sure you're all aware, if we did have a mental health court, those clients would have extreme needs. I mean, they're probably gonna be in contact with us on a daily basis. So we don't have anybody right now that can take on that high need of a caseload. So if in the future, and this is a position that we don't need right now because this is not ready to go right now for January. I mean, we're not ready to go on mental health court for then, so I just want this on your radar, that if we are ready to go on mental health court in some way, I will need a probation officer. I know Judge Rosenbaum mentioned the grant. You know, like when Stephanie, when you asked about it makes me a little leery funding staffing with grants. I also could get reimbursement from AOIC. So I'm also a little bit like, if I can get reimbursed from AOIC, why use the grant money for that position? So that's kind of where I'm at on that. But we would definitely need a probation officer if we were going to be moving forward on mental health court. The other probation officer position would be dedicated to DUI offenses. I have some numbers in the position request for you, but we currently have over 300 clients being supervised by 2 officers. Yeah, that's a lot. So how probation clients are supervised, they all get a risk assessment to determine what risk they are to reoffend. This is an assessment that we are required to do by AOIC. Everybody in the state uses the same risk assessment. So clients are classified into different risk levels: low, moderate, high, and very high. A lot of DUI clients come out as low risk, which is maybe not necessarily an accurate assessment. So we would like to switch to using another assessment tool called the impaired driving assessment that's specifically geared towards DUI offenders. If we do that, those people are going to come out at a higher risk level. So that means they're going to need to be seen even more often when my staff already have too many clients as it is. So that's why I would like to get another officer to be able to dedicate specifically to our DUI caseload. Some new standards just came out from the American Probation and Parole Association talking about caseload size. So they're saying that for caseloads of moderate to high risk clients, the ratio should be 1 officer to every 50 clients. My staff we worked all the numbers on the moderates and the highs, and we're at 1 to 62 right now. And we're also we also have our low clients. So we have way higher caseloads than a lot of other places. We ran some numbers from other counties. McLean County caseloads, they have 1 officer to 61 clients. Vermilion County is at 1 to 56. Macon County is at 1 to 94. And so our total is 1 to 118. So my staff are seeing a lot of clients, and they're also being asked to do a lot by AOIC. So they're now doing cognitive behavioral exercises with our clients. They do a cost-benefit analysis. We give them homework. They are recording themselves doing this, and then our supervisors have to play it back and listen to make sure that they are doing the exercises correctly. So AOIC puts on a lot of requirements of us, which makes appointments take longer, which just makes it a lot harder when you have that many clients. There are also data collection requirements that I know we've talked about a little bit with the JANO. AOIC is making us do a lot more data collection. So my staff are ending up doing a lot of entering into JANO that they don't have time to do with their caseloads being so high. So we are asking for the other officer for DUIs. And again, I will be asking for AOIC to reimburse us for that position. And then the other position that I will be asking for is for an administrative assistant for our front desk at the probation office. So that one should be in there as well. You can see we have a heavily trafficked front desk and office in our department. We're getting 155 phone calls a day and approximately 85 clients walking in the door for probation appointments, drug tests, groups, coming down from court. That's every day we have that many clients that we're coming in contact with, and we only have 2 people at our front desk. So anytime one of them is off, my supervisor of administrative services is covering their breaks at the front desk. So she's sitting at the front desk for an hour and a half every day while people go on their 15-minute breaks if somebody's on vacation. So if somebody's gone for a week, she ends up spending 7.5 hours covering our front desk when she has bills to pay in Munis, payroll things to be doing, AOIC subsidy reports to be doing, any of our paperwork for hiring. It's too much right now for my administrative supervisor to be doing the breaks for the front desk. So we are asking for an additional person for our front desk to be able to provide a little bit of additional support for the front desk. They could do some of the data entry, so the probation staff don't have to do as much data entry, and provide some support for my administrative supervisor, because she's the only one in our department that pays bills. So it's a little scary when we only have one person in the whole department that knows how to do that. So if we could get somebody else trained to be able to do that in Munis and provide her with a little support, that would help out tremendously. That is not a sworn officer position, so that is not a position that we could request reimbursement from AOIC for. So that one would be solely for the county to fund.
Questions from the board? Okay. Moving on to, I think, your probation services fund.
Okay, so this is our probation services fee fund that comes from the fines that clients are paying. So this is one of those funds, like Susan was mentioning, that is decreasing due to the Criminal Traffic Assessment Act and the Safety Act with bonds not being applied and such. So the amount that we are getting per year is decreasing in this fund because of those items. But we do have a very significant fund balance, I realize that. So what we use this fund for is we are paying for cognitive treatment groups, we're paying for GPSs, this funds a lot of drug court services, we're paying for our interpreter. We have an interpreter in the office, a minimum of 2 days a week. That's our Spanish interpreter, and then we also have other interpreters, obviously, that we have to pay for. It pays for partner abuse intervention program classes for clients who are not able to afford it. I probably approve a request every single day to cover that expense for a client. It also pays for treatment for sex offenders in some occasions. So it can only be used for client services. So I can't use the money in this fund to pay for things at the juvenile detention center, because the juveniles at the detention center did not contribute to that fund. So I can only use it for client expenses for probation clients. And anything that I am going to ask for over $1,500, I have to get the approval of Judge Rosenbaum. I can use it for salaries if AOIC is not providing us with the full funding. So we haven't needed that since 2017, I think was the last year that we had to use this fund for that. But if we get to a point wherever AOIC said, well, we can't fully fund you this year, we can use this account to offset and assist with salary shortfall. But it's not something that I can use to fund any of these new positions. They won't let us use this fund for salaries, just for shortfall if they're not providing full funding. So we're talking about some of the things we can use the fund for. One of the ideas we were tossing around was bus passes, getting some bus passes on hand, having those for clients, kind of trying to think of some other ideas that we can use to help support our probation clients. We pay for our MRT books out of this fund. Any of our cognitive thinking classes at Cognition Works, all of that gets paid out of this fund.
Stephanie.
First, I want to commend Travis putting this together, having the different color slides, so we are like, this is general fund, this is special revenue, is super helpful. I'm a very visual person, so I appreciate that a lot. Second, I actually do kind of want to go back to your last fund. Could you, just no hurry, but could you at some point email the board and let us know if we gave you 2 more probation officers, what would that client to probation officer ratio be based on your current clientele?
Okay.
Thanks.
Real quick, the color scheme was Sheila, not me, so thank you, Sheila Jackman.
Any further questions? Michelle?
Shannon, I know this Prevention Services Fund is heavily restricted by AOIC and is very frustrating on what they will and won't let you spend it on. I see you say that they're working on new standards. Is this maybe based on complaints from probation departments, and maybe they're going to loosen the standards up, or it's going to get worse?
It's going to get worse. The chief judges were involved in, so it goes back and forth from the Supreme Court, the chief judges. The chief judges got to make some recommendations. The probation directors were outraged. We gave our complaints to the chief judges, and the chief judges did make some recommendations, but they still are kind of holding out on what they are going to end up going with. But, they won't let us buy vehicles using this fund, even though we are taking, we can use those vehicles to take clients places. They are saying that is not a client service.
Can we lease a vehicle?
They actually did say yes at one point in time, we can lease a vehicle, which, doesn't really.
Well, I mean, if we get to the point where we need to talk about that, because it's easier on our CARF, and this is where we have money,
Yeah.
Not seeing any further questions. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you.
Next, Public Defender, Elizabeth Pollock. Welcome, Liz.
Greetings, board. I was in trial, and so I don't know what I'm supposed to talk about because I forgot, but this is the slide that I made a couple weeks ago. So I think I'm supposed to emphasize what our great things have been this year, and our great things have been that we are full staff as of September 3rd. So when I started, we had 19 FTE, we're up to 24. You can see on the board here that 4 of those positions are funded by grants. I put it in your information. It's a paralegal, an attorney, and 2 mitigation specialists who have greatly improved the functionality and service that our office can provide. But they are in grants, and I hope that those grants continue, but they are not guaranteed. We also spent part of our AOIC grant money to improve our legal technology. We got new computers for the courtroom. We're using Westlaw, which is greatly superior to Lexis. We got a new investigator vehicle for our investigator using car funds. All the post-convictions are now going outside of the office, and I did bring in, I don't know, $300 and something thousand in grant money. My new budget requests, the one that I really, really, really want you guys to consider, there's 2. One is expert witnesses. I had an expert witness grant from ARPA that I spent, and we spent it in about 10 months. It was about $35,000, and part of that was getting an innocent woman out of jail who was charged with first-degree murder. She was not guilty, and we were able to get her a psychological evaluation and prove that, and she is now home with her family where she belongs. So I think having expert money to really delve into these issues, like, was the DNA tested appropriately? Is there a question about the forensic science? Psychological evaluations, things of nature are extremely important to adequately representing our clients. There's an expert request in there. I'm already out of expert money for the year, and my attorneys are now saying, hey, I really could use this. And I'm saying, well, I might come back to the board with a budget amendment in the next 4 months, asking to kind of flesh out the rest of the year. So that's my number 1 priority, except for the new lawyers. That is my absolute number 1. I have to have it. I know it's a recurring expense, and I'm really, really sorry, but I need them. And the reason that I need them is because right now we're making it work. Our cases are being handled. They are moving more quickly. But the tax on my staff is substantial, and the tax on me is substantial. I went on 1 vacation. I took 4 work days off, and I wish I hadn't gone because I was so backed up when I got back that it almost wasn't worth it. The relaxation ended the minute I reopened my email. And that's how everybody feels in our office, because if you care and if you want to do a good job, then you want to answer your client concerns. You don't want to leave people wasting away in jail, not hearing from their attorney for weeks because we just don't have time. And so because I have a staff who are wonderful human beings and who really do believe that the provision of services that we give to our clients are extremely important, they are going to work late. They are going to cost themselves emotionally to get this work done. And it is absolutely exhausting to do this. And I find myself at 5:36 every day thinking, man, I'd really like to see my kids. But there is somebody else's kid that I represent. And that family needs me to do the thing that they need me to do. And so I'm gonna stay and I'm gonna finish that. And a lot of my staff are doing the same thing. And there's a lot of recent research into something called secondary trauma, which affects people who deal with trauma of their clients. It affects social workers, it affects lawyers, it affects anybody who has to absorb the emotional taxation that comes with difficult situations. And I spend a lot of time every week in my office with my attorneys who are saying, I can't do it. I need a break. And I'm saying, all right, so I am shifting caseloads. I am taking more cases personally. I'm trying to do anything I can do to relieve them so that they can have a little bit of work-life balance so they don't quit. Because burnout amongst public defenders is a huge problem. It's a real problem. I'm trying everything I can think of to alleviate that for people. And usually that means taking more on myself personally, which is fine. I mean, my salary is a lot more than theirs. So that's my job. That's what I'm here to do. But it's tiring. And we're getting it done, but we're hanging on by the skin of our teeth. And having those extra 3 attorneys would mean that my people might be able to have a little bit of mental health, positive mental health, which would be good for everybody, because I don't want them to have to choose between seeing their children and surviving and doing their job. Because right now, sacrifices are being made. And those sacrifices are to the detriment of our clients. And they're to the detriment of our clients' families, because we don't just represent one person. We represent somebody who is somebody's child, usually somebody's parent, somebody's sibling, somebody's partner. And the average number of people that you have to talk to for one client is about 3 to 4 for every single one. Because our clients can't talk to their families on the phones in jail because those calls are recorded. And so they can't have honest emotional conversations with their families. And so they say, can you please call my mom? And can you tell my mom what's happening? Can you please call my husband and let them know what's happening? And if we're doing a full service job and representing a whole person, those people come with people. And so that is what we are trying to accomplish. We're trying to do it right for everybody, but we're tired and we're stressed, and I don't want people to quit because we just got to full staff. And if I don't do something to alleviate some of this pressure, I'm going to lose people. And then we're going to be back, scrambling to try to find people to fill those positions again. And we all remember what it did to the entire justice system when the public defender's office was understaffed. There's a reason why Judge Rosenbaum has the court going that he has going, that we've managed to clear all these cases, is because the work is going in on the ground with the people that work for me. And so that is why I'm requesting those positions. I'm continuing to look for grants. I signed up for all these grantee websites that send me emails that say, here's something that you might be able to apply for. And usually, I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, I don't quite fit the criteria, but I'm going to give it a go anyway. I'm constantly looking for money. If I can find more to bring in, I'll bring it in, but I can't make any guarantees except for what I've already brought. And so that is it for my regular general fund, unless anybody has any questions.
JJ.
I just want to make sure these numbers are still right. Your request for the 3 attorneys is about $236,000 total impact?
I think it's more. I think that would be if they were funded at the midpoint, I think. I'm not sure. I calculated 320 something.
Okay, thank you.
Because I have 2 felony attorneys that I'm requesting and 1 traffic, and they make different money.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Ellie.
Just along those lines, I didn't see the attorney request in the packet. So is this they're not, it's in the budget, okay.
It's basically just been built into the public safety sales tax conversation over and over. So.
Okay, thank you.
I did fill the form out 3 times.
Don.
So they took 2 out of my 3 questions, or 2 out of my 4. How long does that grant last? Is it a multi-year grant, the one that you
There's
were-
two grants.
Okay.
So I have a grant, which we're going to go through in a minute. The AOIC grant is the statewide public defender fund, which was passed after the Safety Act went into effect to help alleviate the burden on PD offices. So that grant is paying for my paralegal, one of my attorneys, and all of the modifications to our office that have been made technologically in the last year. It's paying for my Westlaw, all the new computers, increased training and travel.
Okay. And is that a multi-year grant?
It is every year, but we just renewed it, and we're
Okay.
getting more than we did last year.
And it's one that
because
is probably going to happen?
I only
every
see
year?
it increasing over time.
And then the other thing, you didn't mention this, but I just saw down at the bottom, future case management system. I was just wondering, I know that the judge also mentioned something about a case management system. Is that something, are those completely separate, or are those things that can overlap?
So we're breaking off. So the JANO replacement that Barry Dunn is dealing with is the courthouse docket management system. It was never meant to be a case management system for attorneys' offices. So it's a data entry point and it's a document storage point, but I literally can't run a report on it, and they're never going to change that. So Julia and I have seen some demonstrations. We are in the process of working on a request for an RFP to replace the systems for our two offices that will work together and integrate with our existing systems and break off from the court management system.
Thank you for reminding me of that. I think you explained that to us once before, but thank you.
No big deal.
Stephanie?
So first, I want to say to you, I appreciate the work that you've done to try to find funding. Second, and I don't think I need to say this to you, but based on, I was really sick during one of our last previous meetings, and I still watched most of it on television, and I saw the auditor come and say that somehow I was sitting on a mountain of money that I was somehow nefariously keeping from you for reasons beyond my comprehension, and he said something like, cash the check. I want to say to you, I don't have a check. I don't think you think I do, but I just want to put that out on the record.
I appreciate that.
Your office is another office that keeps me up at night. I would like to add to the list of decision points, it's not going to be what you want, but the expert witness thing I think is something we could do. The other thing is a harder, if we don't get public safety sales tax, listen, I could give you, I just did the math on this. If we just gave the sheriff the backfill to the two sergeants, just gave juvenile detention their admin person, and gave you the 3 people you're asking for, and we haven't even heard from Julia yet, and I'm sure she needs stuff too, we would deplete the entirety of our public safety sales tax surplus in less than 3 years. That's not a thing, right? So I don't want to give you false promises, but that at least the expert witness thing, and if you come and you need more expert witness money this year, I promise you that I will do everything I can to get it through this board.
I'm going to keep asking for the staff we need.
I know you are, and I appreciate that, and I think that's the entirety of your job, just like I think it's the
I
entire...
should be asking for 11 lawyers.
I know. I think it's the entirety of Dustin's job. I think it's the entirety of Shannon's job. I think it's the entirety of Julia's job. I also want to throw into the mix, this day, we are hearing from offices, and I think all of our county employees do amazing and hard work. But these offices, that thing that you're talking about, secondary trauma, it's in your office, it's in Julia's office, it's in the sheriff's office, it's in the coroner's office. I think that if we pass public safety sales tax, we should invest on somebody whose full-time job it is to help address that secondary trauma for the people that work in these offices. If you want to understand why people don't stay, it's because they're burnt out and exhausted. And I think that's true across the county, but specifically for the offices that we're hearing today. I respect like hell the work that all of you do, because I'll be blunt, I couldn't do any of these jobs. I couldn't be in the coroner's office or the state's attorney's or yours or in corrections. It would break my heart. And I think that we as a county need to acknowledge that.
Thank
So
you.
whether it's like an external service that we provide that's better than what we're doing now, or an internal staff member, if we pass public safety sales tax, I think that's something we need to add to the conversation. We need to do a better job taking care of our employees, and then maybe some more of them would stay.
Go ahead, Jenny.
And this is just a quick confirmation for the record for this meeting. If we did pass public safety sales tax, we would easily be able to accomplish the 3 additional staff, correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, that is correct. Okay,
Yes,
thank
we'd be
you.
able to do this, the landscape. Now, listen, I'm not saying we'd be able to do everything. We couldn't do 11. Even if we passed it, I will say, I don't think that he would mind. Mr. Storr, halfway through today, leaned over to me and said, why are we only asking for a quarter for every $100? That's a more real conversation than the we don't need it conversation, full stop. It just is. The second thing I wanted to say is, I think your office, a lot of these offices have tried as much as they can with getting grants. And I think we need to try to figure out how we could shift more of that, especially the research piece, onto our grant coordinator, because as awesome as we're doing, I bet we're still leaving money on the table in places that just, quite frankly, these folks don't have time to look for. So trying to think about ways we could systematize some of that research, I think, is super important.
Jamala.
Thank you. Hi, Liz. This
Hi.
isn't a question for you, though.
Yeah.
Michelle, is our budget, or I don't know, when we have the special finance meeting, is it going to have like 2 options? One, if the safety sales tax passes with all the things that we want, and then
Yes, we will have the, oh, look, we can breathe, we have money option, and then we'll have the doomsday option.
okay.
So, yeah.
And so the we can brief option will have Liz's attorneys, her
Yes.
request for the attorneys. Okay.
I have 2 more slides. They're brief. Well, 3, I lied. I don't even know what this one is. This one is, we've never used it. It's a very tiny amount of money that is meant to support technology in the public defender's office. It hasn't gotten big enough ever for us to actually do anything with it, so it just sits here. There you go. The next one is the AOIC grant. Okay, so this is the one I literally had meetings with Travis and Sheila trying to figure out how I'm gonna explain this to you people, and I can't. So the state is on a July to June fiscal year. We are not. Last year in July, I got the first grant. That was about $132,000. We allocated it to be spent over the course of the next year, and there is still money left in there because we have people on salary, and we're not going to close out our fiscal year until December. So it looks like there's way more money in there than has actually already been allocated. I just found out we're getting more. So when we did the Munis entries, it says 145,000. It's actually going to be closer to about 165,000. So they upped our grant, and I'll just be honest, Judge Rosenbaum determined the distributions within the 6th Judicial Circuit, and the money was upped because we're using it, because we're doing what needs to be done with it, and because we are actually trying to utilize it for the benefit of the county and the office. So we do have a slight increase in that. We're gonna have a lot of one-time expenses are done. So the laptops are done, headsets for the secretaries, standing desks, all the new equipment that we bought is all done. So we're shifting the expenses for next year into personnel and into training. So it will continue to pay the paralegal salary, it will continue to pay the lawyer's salary, it will continue to pay my Westlaw subscription, which is about 15 grand. That will leave us with enough money to actually train my people and get them to conferences, trial advocacy work. You know, I've got a lot of really enthusiastic young attorneys who want to do great work, but they've never had a jury trial. And so we have to get them experience and train. Right now, I'm doing all the training. So every trial I have, I'm like, hey, you, come on up to courtroom A, or hey, you, come up to courtroom B, or E, or wherever I am, because I'm everywhere. But that's, I mean, it's good experience, but I would like the formal instruction that comes with those conferences and trainings. And frankly, the state of Illinois offers some stuff, but not a lot. Like recently, I was able to attend the National Association of Criminal Defense Attorneys in Seattle, where I got updates on all of the latest forensic stuff, which I can then bring back to the office and train our people on. That wouldn't have been possible without this grant fund. So that's where that money is going next year. And then I have one more. which is the OSPS grant. This is the mitigation specialists. My 2 social workers are completely funded, salary, fringe, equipment, and training out of this grant. This is a grant that lasts for 2 years. We're in our 2nd year, but it is renewable for 2 additional 2-year terms. And given how it's going with the proliferation of the grant across the country, I see no reason why it should stop. So, but it is a cap of 6, and we are in year 2. That's all I got, unless anybody has any other questions.
Go ahead.
Whoops. Thank you. Do you foresee that cap being lifted, or maybe them extending, renewing that in the next few years?
This is a national organization.
It's national, okay.
It's the Partners for Justice. They're a great organization. I think this is their pilot program. It's proving to be successful. My hope is that it gets renewed, but I have no idea.
Gotcha.
Anybody else?
Thanks, Liz.
All right, thanks, guys.
Our State's Attorney, Julia Reitz. Welcome, Julia.
Good evening, everyone. It's been delightful to spend my wedding anniversary with you tonight.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
How many years?
19. Happy anniversary, honey. He's not watching, but just thought I'd say that. Julia Reitz for the people. In the words of you-know-who. Okay, it's 8:30, so I'm going to try to cruise right along. Everything Liz said, same here. When it comes to the work that we do and all the work that we have to do. But, yeah, everything she said. So, slide that's up there. You heard Judge Rosenbaum talk about adult redeploy. And that is money that the circuit court received from the state, the redeploy program. And the purpose of that is to provide an alternative to incarceration in the Department of Corrections. The court requested that money solely for treatment courts, drug court basically. And so the first year they received it, didn't use it really a lot because it was kind of an in-process learning process. And it always has been available to fund positions. And so Liz and I pushed very hard towards being able to use some of that money to support, to fund staff for specialty courts. She, I believe, asked for 100% of a person. I asked for 80% of a person because I just simply cannot have one attorney making, I can't have one attorney just doing specialty courts. And I understand, she has, her plan for that position is more involved with the client individually. So anyway, I only asked for an 80% funded position. And so one of my budget requests, new requests, is basically that that the county pay for the remaining 20% of a person in order to fully fund the position. I can go on through the whole thing, or I can stop every little bit, whatever y'all would prefer. Keep going?
Just really quick, how much is that, Julia?
It's in my position request. I think the total salary requested would be 80,000. Well, the total salary for that position would be 80, and so it's 20% of 80.
It'd be like 20 grand by the time you add benefits and everything.
So if
I was just going to ask benefits, you got that. Okay.
So if we don't do that, then basically I'm going to have to keep track of time of the person who's doing treatment court and sort of work it off that way and then work it into the budget. But the better way to do it would be to fund a whole new position and be able to add a position, an attorney position, using that adult redeploy funding.
Don't see any further questions there.
Any other questions about that?
Let me just make sure I understand. We have 80% of the funding, and we would need about 20K. That's what you're saying, Michelle?
That is my estimate off the top of my head. but I can talk with Julia and get you a very firm number for the special finance meeting.
Okay, thank you. Can you put that on the special finance meeting?
I would certainly love to ask for 3 more attorneys. And if we get to the point where we might actually have that money, I would certainly ask for 3 more attorneys. But I'm being very realistic right now and asking for 20% of 1 attorney, offset the remaining 80 by the state grant.
And let me just interrupt you real fast, sorry. So just a reminder too, in our initial and repeated public safety sales tax increase conversations, there is already a designated sum of money for the state's attorney's office for either lawyer increases or additional lawyers. So we've already got that piece started in the public safety world, not necessarily in the no public safety world.
Okay, so the second request, special request or additional request that we put into our budget was for a dedicated receptionist position. So this would be an AFSCME position. And we currently what we have is we rotate our secretarial staff, our support staff, through the receptionist position. We used to have a dedicated receptionist. She ultimately became, we moved her up to a full secretary position, and she did some things in addition to being the receptionist. And then as they do, she found a wonderful job at the University of Illinois where they're paying her more and she gets better benefits. So she left. So what we did then was we switched the dedicated assignment to another position where we were rotating staff through on a daily basis. And then we turned to rotating the receptionist position through. And frankly, that has not been working out terribly well because it interrupts the staff's work. They have to go up to the front desk. They might not really know how to deal with the situation or what answers to give people. And that receptionist position is really the front line, the first point of contact for a lot of people. And a lot of people come to my office on a daily basis. They get sent up from the circuit clerk's office, go talk to the state's attorney. They come in, they're victims who are distraught and need to speak to somebody. A wide variety of issues that the receptionist position is dealing with. And we would really have a better opportunity to serve the public if I had somebody who was dedicated in that position. And it also would be very helpful to my support staff who are rotating through that position that interrupts their daily work and makes it difficult for them to do what they need to do. I have an amazing support staff group, but each of them works for 3, sometimes 4 lawyers at a time. I don't have one support staff for each lawyer, as some other departments might have. I have a limited number of support staff, and so I'm asking essentially for 1 more. That's the one real full additional position that I'm asking for. Kind of piggybacking on what Liz has already talked about and what we've talked about with you before, I did put in a request for the additional funding to replace our current case management system with a dedicated prosecutor-based case management system that is compatible with a defense public defender system that the public defender's office would be able to use. I would love to be more transparent with the work that we do, the number of cases we have, the results that we're getting, but our current case management system just has absolutely no ability to provide reports that we can put out for the public. I would love to be able to analyze crime trends. I would love to be able to manage my staff's caseload. Right now, I could not tell you without hand counting how many cases one of my prosecutors have. We just don't have that ability in our current case management system. So So I'm putting it out there as a budget request. We are doing an RFP. We have been exploring all different options. But this, to me, is probably one of the most important things to allow us to better do our work on a day-to-day basis and to provide better information to the public about what's happening in the criminal justice system.
Stephanie.
I probably should have said this when Liz was up here. That's in the budget. So for both you and Liz's office, that's fully funded in the, unless you come back and need more than $2 million, then we got to talk. But from what you said in previous meetings, that's not going to be the case. So that's budgeted, so you're good.
Thank you very much. It's so important. I can't even tell you how, especially with all of the work that we're doing when it comes to the Safety Act and pretrial fairness and all of that. That process has just created so much more work on our end, and a better case management system would just change the world for us in my office. And so on that light, I put in a request for printers for individual attorneys, and it's not that much. It's $11,890 to buy printers for each of my attorneys and a $5,000 recurring cost for toners and parts and supports. So it's not a huge amount of money that we're asking for. What I will tell you is that, you know, the public defenders across the state received funding from the legislature when they enacted the Safety Act. And the legislature said, we need to fund the public defenders so that they can do this good work. And I was on the negotiating committee, and I said, you know, we all need additional money. And the legislature said, oh, yeah, we'll get to you. Well, they didn't get to us last year. They're not getting to us this year. They're not getting to us next year. So the legislature has provided $0 to prosecutors' offices to enact the Pretrial Fairness Act. And prosecutors' offices are the ones who are doing the vast majority of the work. We have to file the petitions. We have to provide discovery to the defense attorneys. And by discovery, I mean police reports. And here in Champaign County, we receive full police reports on every case that we charge. So that means that we have to copy full police reports and give them over to the defense attorneys. We have to file petitions down in the circuit clerk's office. That's all paper. So we have to do that all before court at 1:30 every day. And we might have 5 people in custody that we're dealing with, or we might have 15, or we might have 25. So we're doing all of this work on top of all of the other work that's being done in cases when somebody is going to a jury trial, in child support, in JA court, where people are dealing with abused and neglected children, and there's stacks and stacks and stacks of DCFS reports. We have 4 copiers in our office. And Bud, my operations manager, has been amazing at trying to get on the Xerox people to make these things work. But inevitably, on any given day, one of them isn't working. And so my attorneys have to get up from their desks, go try to make copies of things, run around the office. I was talking to Joel Fletcher before I came over here, and he was telling me when he does a trial and he needs to copy things, he basically sends everything to all 4 copiers, hoping that one of them is going to work and not jam. Yeah, because we need things, right? We have to provide jury instructions. We have to provide copies. Jamala knows exactly what I'm talking about here. So I personally have my own copier. I'm spoiled. And it's so easy to sit at my desk and I need to print something out, I print it out and it's there. The rest of my staff don't have their own copiers. So I'm just asking to, I know the county health plan, has a little bit, the county health plan, run to the copier and run back to your desk, run to the copier and run back to your desk, right? I mean, we're getting our steps in the state's attorney's office. We're moving, we're grooving. But we would be doing our work so much better if we just simply had printers for everyone. So I'm throwing that in there. again, I'm trying to be realistic. I've done this for 20 years. You know, I never come to you all and asked you for anything that I know the county can't afford. So I'm trying to be really realistic here. I'm asking for 20% of an attorney, a receptionist that's an AFSCME position to help out my support staff, and some copiers.
I can't find what the cost would be for the receptionist position. Where would that start as a, because as somebody who has had to fill in at reception when I don't want to, I know that that's definitely something that could contribute to job dissatisfaction. I think it's definitely something I would, want to look at. I don't see the in here. So is that?
Yeah, I must have missed getting that in the packet.
Okay.
I will print that out for tomorrow's packet.
Thank you.
And you'll have that number.
Okay. We also,
There's a couple of them that we ran across with,
Okay.
with Liz and the state's attorney.
Thank you.
And that's also, part of contract negotiations going on right now. So whatever it is, it's not enough, but. And then the last set, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Can you put the printer thing on the decision point list? Thanks.
The last set of slides are slides that actually I've presented in the past. I don't remember if it was last year or the year before. But this is discussion about attorneys' salaries in the state's attorney's office. And I will tell you all right now that in the past week, I have lost 3 attorneys. 2 are going to the Department of Children and Family Services, and 1 is going to another state's attorney's office. They are all going to be making $20,000 a year more than I am able to pay them under my current salary schedule. I cannot blame them a bit. They are not leaving because they're dissatisfied with the work or the office. Just today, Bud drove around an ice cream cart. He went out and bought ice cream for everyone. He put ice cream truck music on his cell phone and pushed a cart around. We have a lot of fun. We try, you were talking about mental health and secondary trauma and how do you deal with it? Well, we try to do all of these things, but at the end of the day, people have to support their families, and they're looking around and they're seeing other opportunities, either at the university or at other state agencies or at other state's attorney's offices who are also having difficulty retaining and recruiting, and they are basically doubling up salaries of empty positions and being able to offer much higher salaries than I'm able to offer under my current scheme. And this is not unique to us. It's not unique to Illinois. I was on a webinar the other day. I'm on the board of the National District Attorneys Association, and I was talking with prosecutors from across the country. We are all experiencing the same issues as far as recruitment and retention goes. So here locally, because some of you are new and didn't see these slides before, attorneys, and this goes for my office and the public defender's office. So under the current salary scheme for Champaign County, attorneys are in their own kind of unique grade, but it is comparable to what we call grade J positions. And so I've put that up on the slide with what the minimum, midpoint, and max is. So the starting salary for attorneys is $56,600. Liz and I would both tell you we can't find anybody who would take that, right out of law school at $56,000. It's very difficult to hire anybody, and we have not hired anybody right out of law school at that amount. Midpoint only 73, max less than 100,000. Grade, so that's comparable to grade J. And then the only specific attorney grade that we have is grade L, which is a lead prosecutor and first assistant public defender, which is midpoint 90,000. There is a grade K in between, obviously, J and L, with a higher starting salary, higher midpoint, lower maximum for some weird reason, than the attorney line. So those are kind of the ones that I'm looking at. If you flip to the next one then. So when I did this, when I looked at these, I looked at each of the jobs in Champaign County that are listed under those particular grades, J and K. And I specifically just looked at the education requirements for those positions across the county. Only one, and I believe that's an engineering position, requires a postgraduate degree in grade K. So attorneys who require postgraduate degrees are making less than other county employees with much lower education requirements, and therefore lower debt requirements and all of that sort of thing. So that is what is in this slide. So again, this was a presentation I think I made to you 2 years ago. Last year? Okay, last year. The point is still the same. It is still an employee market. We are competing for a smaller candidate pool. I teach at the law school. Law school classes are smaller. Law students are older. They have established career paths. They're not staying here. They know where they're going. So I have less entry-level candidates. And again, there's less incentive to stay put, as I have experienced this week, because salary mobility comes more from moving out of this office to another office than in our internal 4 to 5% increases that we've had over the past couple of years. I try to do what I can to move money around, and I'm telling you because I think you appreciated when the sheriff told you that he was using money from other positions to fund the growth. That's what I'm going to do. I now have 4 open attorney positions, 3 just from this past week and 1 that I had open before. So I will tell everybody and anyone who's watching this and my staff as they're possibly hearing about this, they will be getting raises because I have to keep them. Ice cream from Bud is not enough. I got to keep them because they have to do the people's work. Sangamon County, which is Springfield, our neighbors, a comparable population in 2022, they did a salary review, and I've just given you the increases that they created for a series that they have their staff as ASA 1, ASA 2, ASA 3 seniors, and division chiefs. And so basically they moved everybody up in the starting salary in those different levels. And I think that that's a good scheme that I would like to follow, and that's something that we've been discussing. And then similarly, I'm providing you with comparisons from other agencies, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the City of Champaign, local private firms, and now I'd throw in the Department of Children and Family Services and other state agencies, are paying attorneys significantly more than I'm able to pay my attorneys, than we are able to pay our attorneys. Because again, these people are doing the people's work. They're doing your work. They represent you all in civil matters. They represent children who are victims, who need the dog that Judge Rosenbaum is talking about. They represent domestic violence victims. They represent sexual assault victims. They appear in drug court to try to help people get treatment that they need. They are working on mental health cases every day to try to get people in the right direction. I am in court every day representing the people, handling juvenile court, doing the hearings that we have to do under the Safety Act. We are in court all day. We also work at night. And we work at night because we are on call. And so if there's something significant that happens, or if a police officer just has a question they don't know the answer to, they are calling my on-call attorney in the middle of the night, and we are going out to judges' houses to get search warrants. They work on weekends. Under our new scheme with the Safety Act, the only people who have to come to the courthouse on a weekend, the only people, not the judges, not the public defender's office, the only people are assistant state's attorneys who have to see who's in custody and make a determination whether that person can be released or whether for the public safety we need to hold them over until they appear in court. Judges are doing that by phone. One time from the golf course. My attorneys have to come in, pull police reports, pull priors, make decisions. The public defender's office is no longer involved in that process. And we don't get paid extra for any of that. And that's fine, because we're doing the people's business. But again, I need to pay these people living wages for professionals so that I can keep them, because losing 3 of them in a week, it's hard. And then the rest of the slides are just about the other funds that I have, which are not really, we're not really asking for anything, just to let you know, we have a contract with the state to provide, to work with custodial parents and obtain paternity orders and child support orders for indigent custodial parents. And I hope, I know some of you were at the Family Resources Day that we did, and that really came out of our Child Support Enforcement Division. Laura Keller specifically in my office took it upon herself to make this an annual event. This was our 2nd event, and Bud, again, super helpful in that regard, and Matt Bannock, who you know is our civil attorney. That was all on them to put together this amazing Family Resource Day where we had over 40 different agencies from across the county come to Lincoln Square Mall and provide information to citizens and to each other so that they could share resources and help people. And that we're dedicating to our friend Senator Scott Bennett, and we'll do that every year that we can. And that has nothing, it's not funded by any of this, it's entirely us and the Senator Faraci's office also, but an amazing event that has to do with helping people move forward in a positive direction. So not really much to talk about on the support enforcement budget side. It's a contract that is ongoing with the state. And Drug Asset Forfeiture Fund, this is our kind of our fund that changes. It depends on what law enforcement is doing when it comes to seizing assets that are used in the course of crimes, and specifically mostly with regards to drug enforcement. And it really is just dependent on what is going on. One year we had a Lamborghini that we were able to forfeit and sell. Other years we don't have that much. And this is kind of the fund that we use to do some of the things that Liz talked to you about that she's funding through the grant from the state. So training opportunities, some of the office things that we have we're able to use we're able to fund from the Drug Asset Forfeiture Fund. And the automation fund, just like she said, it's a little tiny fund that we get $2 from every traffic case or felony or misdemeanor offense, and those, that's a fines and fees payment issue like Susan has told you, but it's a little fund that we have that we haven't really used for a whole lot as it's growing. And I think that's it. Any other questions?
Jeff?
Just a real simple one. Why couldn't the printers be paid for out of the ARPA funds or whatever the interest level is? What is the cost of these printers? $1,000 a printer, 5 printers, $5,000? Is it $2,000 a printer, 10 printers?
12,000.
Yeah, it's more of a question of what's the county's overall goal, because we spend a significant amount of money on the Xerox contract. So if the Xerox system is not working for offices, I think we have a different problem that we need to address, but having the Xerox contract, which I believe is, I think it's over $1 million, and then also installing individual printers defeats the purpose of having the contract. So we need to, I think, pick a system and invest in it and utilize it. So I think there's a couple of options that we could look at on that situation. And the Xerox contract is up early next year, so we might be just looking at a different company that has better equipment.
I'm going to strongly disagree with you because I only have 4 Xerox printers. And I have 21 attorneys and 13 secretaries and 4 victim advocates and 2 investigators and an office manager, and who are all using the same 4 machines on a daily basis.
Right, and that sounds like that's probably the crux of the problem, is that you're not equipped with enough capacity in the copiers that you have. And we could address it by bringing in more copiers.
So, simple question. How many printers do you need? How much does it cost per printer? And then why can't that come out of the ARPA fund? Is it possible to do that?
Yeah, the ARPA funds are the interest, so there's no restrictions on how you spend them.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll be honest, I've never asked for anything out of the ARPA funds because it seemed clear to me that ARPA funds were for more community-based things, and I wasn't going to get anything if I asked for them, so I never asked.
Yeah, but now we're into the accrued interest out of the ARPA funds, which has no restrictions.
No, it does not have the ARPA restrictions on it.
There you
no.
go. So that's just an option.
Further questions? Don?
Yeah, I'm curious about the automation fund. I hadn't heard of that before. So that's something where this is $2 from defendants. Is that regardless of charge? Like, is it $2 if it's a felony, misdemeanor, or court supervision? Or is there a difference in cost? I don't think your mic's on.
Oh, thanks. It's statutory, and it's $2 in any case, from felonies to misdemeanors to traffic cases.
And where does that money come from then? Like, it comes out of the defendant's, like,
Right.
it's a fine from the defendant, but
Right.
it's a statutorily $2
Yes.
fine
Right.
for anyone who gets convicted.
Correct.
Interesting. So what's the?
But if I think as Susan talked about, there's a lot of changes in the law that allow judges to waive those statutory fines and fees. And again, because we do not have bail money sitting in a pool to disperse, then we have to collect from people. So it's not coming in the way that it used to be for those legitimate reasons.
Right. So then my other question is just kind of related and just kind of curious. I was looking at your performance indicators about felonies, misdemeanors, and DUIs and things. Like, what's the average cost of prosecuting a felony versus prosecuting a misdemeanor? And, like, I don't know if there's a way to do that, maybe human hours?
There's not really a way to do that.
Okay.
I mean, some misdemeanors are extremely complicated. Some felonies are very simple. It really just depends on the case.
Okay.
Stephanie?
Just to speak about these, basically, these automation funds, I have very, very strong feelings about these, and I think most of the elected officials do too. In their infinite wisdom, years and years and years ago, the state decided that counties weren't putting enough money into their technology, and in order to try to force them to, they mandate certain pieces of different funds that we get go into these automation funds. But to be perfectly blunt, there's never enough money in any of them to do anything. And so all it does is make our budgeting process more complicated. And then if you save it up for like 20, I forget, the previous clerk had been saving his up for like years, and then he bought like a machine. Do you know what I mean? Right. And so it's just, it's the state does this to counties because they didn't feel like counties were like keeping up with technology. but this ain't gonna help us keep up with technology. Just kind of all it does, instead of us being able to decide what to do with that $2, it has to go in there. And if you look at almost every office in the county, there's one of these. So, you know, maybe what if we could have just had it all glommed together, and then 1 year bought somebody from some, you know, 1 year bought something for the state's attorney, and 1 year, but instead we've got like $7,000 in 5 different pots, 12, you know what I mean? And it's, I don't want to say it's useless, but I mean, this money just, you know, every so often somebody's like, I could do one, you know, I could buy something, but it's, I really, so just to keep tally, and listen, I know this meeting was long. I anticipated it being long. I heard from a lot of people that were like, what would we even spend the public safety sales tax money on? Okay, so you got a pretty clear answer, right? I think it was Jamala's point, we need to look at this as like option A and option B. So right now, and I want to make this clear, we're not saying we're doing it, but under consideration for option A, which is doomsday scenario, we don't get the expanded tax, we are considering where to put the deficit that we're under, the doors for the juvenile detention center, the difference of the sergeant upgrade for the sheriff's office, some sort of scanning for the clerk's office, printers, and the grant match for Julia's office. Was there some? You want to put that on there? I didn't put that on there. That's a recurring cost. All right. So Jamala wants to put the receptionist. I'm trying not to put recurring costs. I feel like there was something for
Expert witness.
The expert witnesses for Liz. That's the landscape. Everything else, we're not saying no. We're saying that's an option B if we get public safety sales tax consideration. If you want something to move onto the other side of that ledger, let's put a date on it and tell the other board members that couldn't make it, you have to have that to Travis and Michelle and Steve's office by, give me a date. When do you need it by?
Phones are out.
What?
September 13th.
Okay, by September 13th.
Friday the 13th.
By Friday, ooh, right? Okay, so by Friday the 13th, now listen, that is not to say that everything else is not up for consideration. It's just up for consideration on the side of the ledger if we get the tax. What I'm talking about now is if we don't.
Real quick, can we let our fine state's attorney go home while we discuss all this?
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Well, you had a plan.
Brett.
Thank you. Can we get a list of that in an email or something of that? Is it possible? Because we covered a lot of stuff today and probably will tomorrow too.
I am planning on creating a list for tomorrow's packet that I'll be handing out. So obviously anything on tomorrow won't be on that list, but today's will be.
All right, we still have opioid remediation funds. Michelle, were you going to handle that?
I've got it.
Got it. Thanks, Travis.
So this is the last slide of the night, hopefully. So this is the opioid remediation fund. It's the funds from the national settlement agreements from the 3 largest drug distributors. One thing you'll notice is the color coding of this is a non-general fund color coding, but right now it is in our general fund. I am working with Brandy of the auditor's office to create a new fund for this for FY25, but she's been nice enough to wait until after these meetings to work with me on that. So all the fund balance revenues and expenditures for this will be going into its own fund starting in FY25. So you'll see a new fund in the budget book. As of the end of July, we had about $1.1 million in the fund under the restricted fund balance. So that's money in the general fund balance that we can't spend for anything besides this. And just probably last week, I think you guys approved a contract for CU at Home for $580,000 that will be spent from these funds. So depending upon the timing of that, that expenditure will either hit the general fund or the new fund, depending upon if it's this year or next year. So, any questions?
Thank you, Travis. We are adjourned. Thank you, folks.
Please leave your microphones and name tags out. I'll just be collecting batteries.